The action of this funny and interesting story takes place in the Kingdom of the Swordsman in the Eastern Wasteland, where the attack on the city took place. One of the attackers threw the students back and said that their clan could not do anything against this phantom transformation. Times had changed. Now these lands would belong to their blood clan. The wounded student shouted that the villain should not talk nonsense because he had already informed Brother Alan, and when he came, none of them would leave. 5 terrifying masters towered over the students, and one of them said that he did not know anyone among the best students of the Sword Clan with that name. Apparently, he is not even among the top 10, and if he dares to fight the Great 5 of the Blood Clan, he will be finished. A man with a terrible scarlet aura said that he should come here and collect the corpses of the students. After these words, the huge red projection that the villain summoned punched the student. Suddenly, an unknown guy rushed towards the threat at the speed of a cheetah. The scarlet fist was immediately blocked by his skills. The unknown villain in the hat was surprised that someone was able to block his attack. 2 students who were preparing for death rejoiced that they were saved, and the third of them shouted that it was Brother Alan. Brother Alan, a long-haired man with blue eyes and a powerful ki aura inspiring calm, was glad that he had time. The villain laughed when he saw that same unknown sword fighter. He asked if the guy was looking for death, and his projection began to create a powerful scarlet sphere for attack. But Alan immediately struck the monster with one light blow of his sword and stopped all his attempts to hit the enemy. Instantly, the entire Great 5 from the Blood Clan received colossal injuries and were defeated. A few moments later, they were all lying at Alan's feet unconscious. Apparently, it was all over for them. Unnoticed by the others, a strange scarlet sphere rolled from one of the 5 masters. Alan asked the students if everything was okay, and they thanked him for his help. Alan asked Brother Steve if he told him not to do anything, because if he didn't have time, they would have died. To which Steve replied that this would be a lesson for him. But these masters sacrificed 1,000 monks just so that refined the blood soul pearl, and therefore he could not sit idly by. Alan advised the guy not to listen to the clan's tales. Let him do what he can and live an ordinary life. This is the best path to improvement for his generation. Suddenly, the student noticed how the scarlet pearl began to emit purple, ominous smoke and head towards Alan. An elder of the Blood Clan emerged from it and asked who dared to speak out against his students. He then attempted to attack our hero with the fist of ghostly comprehension. Steve recognized him and shouted that he was the master of the 7th level of the Purple Palace. But Alan was already preparing for a new battle, drawing his invincible sword from its sheath. The blade of the blade shone with a blue light, and immediately multiple cuts of the sword rushed towards the master. Alan's power was able to stop the elder's ghostly hand. The master was surprised that someone was actually able to stop his attack. He thought about it and said that Alan was a good fighter, and it would be a pity to even kill such a person. The villain invited Alan to join them because their clan has always respected the strong. He will make him his #1 student and support the guy. Besides, their clan is full of treasures and beauties. Alan answered the elder that he had heard that they work from early morning until late at night, eat and sleep in the open air, and are constantly hunted. On their way to improvement, they kill each other because they only care about their own benefit. To which the master replied that they don't have many rules, and the discipline is lame. But their main principle is that the more you work, the more you get. Alan laughed at the phrase, the more you work, the more you get. At their sword school, working hours are regulated, and besides, he has been here for a long time and sincerely enjoys the time he spends here. Therefore, he will never join them. After these words, the guy used his sword technique, which cuts everything in its path. The master tried to hold back such a powerful attack, but he had difficulty doing it. Ultimately, Alan's sword technique won, and a huge explosion was heard, signaling the swordsman's victory. Steve rejoiced at the guy's victory and asked if he did the right thing by calling him here for help. The other disciples couldn't believe their eyes. It was impossible that their clan's initial level of swordsmanship could be so powerful. The cut-up demon, who lay without strength, asked Alan why he didn't want to join them. The guy replied that he had worked hard for many years, so he knew in advance what he would tell him. The master dared to hang noodles on his ears and thereby doomed himself to these humiliations. Suddenly, a strange sphere rose from the master's body, emitting a purple, ominous aura. The sphere flew up to Alan's hands and whispered in a quiet voice for the guy to finish off the elder. Then the strange artifact flew away at the speed of sound. Alan did not understand what happened, but assumed that the master's spirit had left the body and was trying to hide. He readied his energy-charged sword and was ready to go in pursuit of the soul. However, suddenly the guy heard the disgusting sound of an alarm clock. The hero stopped, took his watch out of his cloak and began to look at it. After that, to the surprise of the other students, he turned around and said that the main mission was completed and he was leaving. One of the students could not believe that Brother Alan would simply allow the soul of the elder of such a powerful clan to escape. Suddenly, Steve started telling other students about Alan that they didn't understand something. The fact is that Brother Alan practices the 9 to 5 method. He pointed to the sun setting behind the mountain, which meant that time was up. This means that it is now the end of Alan's working day. What irritated Alan most was that at the end of the working day he still had a lot of work left, and he was practically forced to work overtime. The next day we are transported to the residence of the Swordsman clan. Here warriors train to control their blades, which they can use to fly if they focus enough chakra. In order to be strong, they train hard every day. But not everyone is such a hard worker. One of the students turned around and looked at the one who was again lazy and doing nothing. He didn't understand how the elders even accepted a student like this guy. It was Alan, who was sleeping peacefully under a tree while others were training tirelessly. The noise of the warriors woke up the guy, and he reluctantly began to stretch and wake up. He took off his blindfold to look at his comrades. Alan returned after midnight, so he didn't get much sleep. If he had known about everything in advance, he would not have been the one to put such troublesome tasks on his shoulders. Up to this point, he had been continuously working overtime for 5 years 996. The 996 work schedule is an unofficial work schedule from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. His boss shouted at the guy from morning to night that he was lazy and that he should continue working until he finished and not even think about leaving. As a result, the guy lost consciousness and his colleagues told the boss to call an ambulance, but he said that first let the guy finish the project. Suddenly, Alan died and accidentally ended up in this fantasy world. Here he is a simple student of the Swordsman clan, and finally he has a second chance to change everything. But other students, just like in his previous life, tell him to work hard and not stop for sleep, because a student of his age should devote himself to practice, not sleep. Everyone around tells the guy that he is lazy, and they have never seen such a lazy person. But he decided, so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past, he would never work overtime in this world. But the guy didn't expect that even here he would stand out so much. Suddenly, someone distracted him from his memories by calling his name. It was Steve who told Alan that the elder was looking for him. He wanted to ask him about the details of yesterday's mission. Alan asked if Steve had told him anything about him. The enthusiastic student replied that the master had already called them to talk, but no one said a word about Alan's strength. The eternal lazy man replied that this was very good, and next time the guy would teach Steve a couple of techniques. The student immediately blushed and thanked his brother in arms. Alan used his magic sword and headed towards the elder's palace. After some time, he arrived at the main hall. In this world, improvement is divided into 6 stages. From the lowest to the highest they go in order. Chakra improvement, the realm of the spirit. Then, the formation of the soul is the limit of the palace of the immortals, sealing one's power. And the last stages are called the purple palace, and then the ascent to truth. Each of these stages is divided into 9 levels. But there is someone more serious than all these stages. This is the head of the Sword Clan, Reynold, the 6th level of ascension to truth. The mightiest of this world are called his elemental sword god. Alan waved to Reynold and said good morning to the elder. The powerful warrior looked at the guy with a merciless gaze and told him not to forget where he was. At that moment, Alan took a box out of his pocket and said that this was tea that he had planted and that it had ripened a couple of days ago. This information blew Reynold's mind. He immediately approached Alan like a child and began to beg him to let him try his new tea. Who would have thought that the god of the elemental sword, Reynold, is madly in love with tea? Alan used his old knowledge of growing succulents and other plants to develop the best variety of tea, which helped him build a good relationship with the elder. But this is a must for any self-respecting employee. His thoughts were interrupted by an elder who was hiding tea in his sleeve. He asked how yesterday's mission went. Some students said that it was Alan who saved them. The guy looked away and replied that it happened completely by accident. He then took out a strange sphere and said that he took it from one of the disciples of another clan. Reynold immediately understood what this sphere was. It was a blood pearl. He took it from his student and asked if Alan knew what kind of artifact it was and what power it had. Reynold looked at the guy with a serious look and began his story. But Alan immediately waved it off and began shouting that he didn't know anything and didn't want to hear it, and that in general he wasn't interested in it all. He tried to run away, saying that if he had nothing more to say to his master, then he went about his business. Alan wanted to spend this life carefree, so let the elder leave these troubles to someone else, but the master ordered him to stop. Reynold shouted that Alan should listen when the elder spoke, and even though the guy had succeeded in growing tea, as a true student he could not be so passive. The master wanted to know why the guy did not take part in the sword training last week. Alan replied that he would then have to wait an hour until it was his turn, and the master should know that Alan has his own principles in training, so he needs to be understood. Reynold objected, shouting that because he missed class, all the masters came to him to complain, and they all unanimously asked to demote Alan from the students. The guy calmly turned around and asked if they really said that. Reynold thought that he was too harsh with him and should have said it more carefully. However, Alan was only glad to hear these words, because if he was demoted to an internal disciple, no one would bother him anymore. Alan asked the elder when he would demote him, and Reynold's patience was already reaching its limit. And then he exploded and shouted that in the entire history of the clan, there was not a single precedent like this. If Alan was demoted, it would be tantamount to a slap in the face to his elder. The guy replied that he didn't know that something so wonderful would happen. Suddenly, someone behind the guy called his name, and Reynold was glad that she had finally come. The girl went to Alan and said that tens of thousands of students work day and night to become true students. But for some reason, only brother Alan is ready to give up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This beauty's name was Hannah, and she was the true #1 disciple of the Sword Clan. Even in her early years, she achieved great success in cultivation, and since then, she has been ranked first among the disciples. She is called the future of the Sword Clan, and she was also very beautiful. Meanwhile, Alan takes 55th place, which is the clan's last place. The guy said that his sister doesn't know, but he has been stuck in the Purple Palace for a long time. So Alan decided to start over as an inner student, re-strengthen the spirit, break through the limit of the Palace of Immortality, and become stronger, because the one who repeats everything 10,000 times becomes the strongest. Hannah replied that she didn't think he would be so progressive and think so deeply about ways to improve. It was different from what she had heard about him. The girl bowed down and said that she was wrong, and meanwhile the master was watching this performance that Alan staged. Reynold interrupted their conversation and said that the reason the guy was here was because several masters wanted to make a request to him. Alan turned warily and asked what the masters wanted from him. They want him to go on a mission with Hannah and learn how to work hard from her best student. This was the worst thing Alan could imagine. It seemed to him that the elder was mocking him. It was Hannah who, through her hyperactivity, doomed the entire clan to live up to her standards. He and Alan were completely different people, and the guy believed that they could not work together. Reynolds said that the girl is the best student and people line up to her for advice every day, and the guy is also dissatisfied that he had such a wonderful opportunity to study. Alan replied that he was simply worried that he was not good enough for this mission and would interfere with his sister's improvement. He turned to the girl and with a calm expression asked her to confirm his words that she did not want the guy to interfere. Hannah, on the contrary, shouted to the guy not to worry about it. Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm, and she said that their entire clan was family and they should support each other and make progress together. In addition, Brother Alan can use this opportunity to prove himself and destroy the rumors that other people are spreading about him. Alan was gripped by fear. The guy thought that they were trying to intimidate him because he didn't want to suffer like she did. Then he used another trick. The guy folded his hands in a sign of humility. He stood in front of the elder and said that if he took part in this mission, his tea leaves would be left without sensitive supervision. The elder even invited Hannah so that Alan could take part in this mission, but he did not intend to deviate from his principles. He had no reason to go with her when he could play the fool just fine here. Suddenly, the enraged master raised his hand, making a strange gesture. Reynolds said that if Alan successfully completed this task, he would give him 3 days off. 3 days off, these words echoed in the guy's head. A whole 3-day weekend, one could only dream about it. Alan immediately grabbed the master's hand as a sign of gratitude. His eyes glowed with enthusiasm, and he asked the elder to immediately inform him of the contents and location of the mission. He will go through fire, water, and copper pipes to complete it, and meanwhile the master only sighed in disappointment. A quarter of a day later, Hannah worked hard to master the techniques. Alan, meanwhile, was yawning after a deep sleep. He approached the training girl and said that she was training very hard. Hannah, meanwhile, was angry with the guy because he was late. Alan answered her that if he did not sleep at lunchtime, he would not have any strength for the battle. The girl began to scold him, saying that he should devote more time to practice. So she, for example, came here on time and managed to make 3,000 swings of the sword. But Alan, it turns out, needs sleep like an ordinary person. He is too weak. The guy said that she was right, and that he would think about everything at his leisure, and then give his best at the next training session with double strength. But in fact, he was only thinking about the fact that Hannah was grumbling like an old woman. The girl exhaled in disappointment and said that they didn't have time for this and it was time to move out. At that same second, our new team rushed to the mission site. While they were flying to the place, Hannah asked Alan what he thought about the mission, to which he replied that the elder had sent them to investigate the disappearances of people in the mountains, and this mountain range was located right next to the sacrificed village. Alan suspected that the disappearance was not accidental at all. Hannah agreed with him. The inspired girl encouraged the guy, telling him not to worry. Given his level, she would protect him. Alan looked at her and thanked her happily. He didn't think that Hannah would be a person he could rely on. The guy thought that he had hit the jackpot and would get a 3-day weekend and make friends with the beauty. Alan mentally thanked the elder, and they set off on their mission. Towards evening, the team reached the mountains where people disappear. The girl told Brother Alan that they first needed to ask the local residents, and Alan, meanwhile, was looking for something in his robe. Suddenly, he took out his watch, opened it, and began to look at it, which greatly surprised Hannah. The girl looked with a surprised look and did not understand why Alan was counting down. When he counted to 0, he shouted joyfully that the time was up. He went to rest and shouted to Hannah that he was leaving everything to her, and tomorrow let her tell him everything. After some time, our hero reached the inn of a local village. The establishment was a bit empty. Alan came in and asked the owner to give him 1 room. The seemingly gloomy and tired man replied that it would cost 1 silver. Alan provided the currency, and the owner handed him the key to the room on the 2nd floor. When Alan took the key, he noticed a strange tattoo on the man's hand that looked like the tentacles of a black squid. Although this could be a clue, Alan decided that it did not matter because now it was his time to rest. When he got to his room, he lay down on the soft bed and thought about how Hannah was progressing in the investigation. After some time, the guy woke up due to a loud noise from below. The owner was telling someone that there was no room, and some girl was shouting that there was clearly no one here, and the owner was acting ugly. The guy jumped out of bed and was unhappy that someone woke him up. But Alan had already heard this screaming voice somewhere. It was Hannah who offered 2 silver pieces for the room, but the owner still said that there were no more places. Suddenly, someone called the angry girl by name. Hannah was delighted to see her brother Alan, who told her not to torment the owner because he had already said that there was no room. The guy turned to the man and asked if his younger sister could spend the night in his room. The gloomy owner nodded, and Hannah was surprised at this proposal. The girl could not believe that she would spend the night with him in the same room. She was seized with panic. Alan walked up the stairs and told the stunned Hannah that if she didn't want to spend the night on the street, then she should follow him. Hannah was embarrassed. She had no choice but to follow the guy. Alan walked slowly, and the girl followed him like a very quiet mouse. She was worried and thought that they would not do anything that would make her ashamed later. In addition, the girl is much stronger than him and will be able to stand up for herself. A few minutes later, they came to the room where Alan was eating cookies, and Hannah was sitting quietly next to him. The guy asked the girl if she had dinner. He handed her a plate of cookies and asked if the girl wanted to eat a little, to which Hannah replied that they should learn to abstain from food in order to strengthen their hearts. Only when your heart is strong can you... The girl didn't have time to finish speaking when Alan put a cookie in her mouth. The guy was wiping his hands of crumbs, and meanwhile, Hannah was all red. Having swallowed the food, she ascended, tasting the sweet but not greasy pastry, which melted in the mouth and gave off a little flour. It penetrated the girl's heart, making her want to drown in it. At that very moment, her sanity returned. She started screaming at Alan, scolding him for sneaking up on her with this cake. The guy, with a calm expression, turned to the girl and asked if it was delicious, to which she replied that she really liked the pastries. But there is no benefit from such food, so it is much better not to eat. But Alan did not agree with this statement. He asked his sister if she had ever wondered whether it was possible to walk by leaps and bounds, avoiding 5 vegetables, 3 flowers, and the bustle of the world. The 5 vegetables are vegetables that Buddhist monks do not eat, and the 3 colors are the 3 colors of the clouds, and Alan said that they should not be avoided. After all, they walk around this world, and even with all their desire, they cannot isolate themselves from everything in the world. Blind avoidance will only tire you physically and psychologically. You will be afraid of everything that makes practice difficult. The girl asked how then they could practice without giving up human desires. It's impossible. Alan replied that he thought that true monks were not afraid to face temptation and experience it themselves. As with these cakes, if you're afraid that their taste will disturb your mind, you should try to get used to them. When you learn to treat this as something completely ordinary and remain indifferent, this will be your first step towards real practice, and only with a pure heart will a girl be able to see the truth. Only in this case will she feel like a fish in water, free and natural. Lost in his thoughts, Alan opened his eyes slightly to look at the girl. She was in shock, and the guy realized that he had said too much and apparently her brain had overheated. Suddenly, the girl jumped up from her seat, shouting that she understood everything. Only by facing desire and then giving it up can she return to her true nature and experience the essence of the world. After these words, Hannah began to eat all the sweets that were on the table with great enthusiasm. Alan was shocked. Now all his sweets will go to the girl, and not to him. A little later, offended by Hannah, he said that today she would have to sleep on the floor, to which the girl grinned and replied that she would not sleep, but would just sit and meditate. And so it happened, Alan fell asleep in a cozy bed, and Hannah sat and meditated in the room. Suddenly, an unfamiliar man approached the door to their room. The man took out something and said that he was ready to let this girl go. But now, unfortunately, he will have to end her life, after which he placed a strange incense in front of their door. Hannah continued to meditate, and the smoke from the incense gradually began to fill the entire room. The girl opened her eyes slightly. It seemed strange to her that she felt some kind of aroma. At that same second, she realized that she was surrounded by a mysterious fog that was penetrating more and more into their room. Hannah realized that it was poison from which there was no escape. Suddenly, her body began to become heavier, and her face became covered with sweat. A few moments later, the girl fell to the floor, exhausted. All she could do in her current state was to whisper for Brother Alan to run away as soon as possible. However, the guy was lying on the bed and a strange aura was concentrated around him. It seemed that the guy was completely unaffected by the poison and was simply watching the girl. Hannah's vision gradually began to dim, and she eventually closed her eyes and lost consciousness. Meanwhile, a secret meeting took place in the forest outside the village. The man told the master that the disciples of the Sword Clan were knocked down by him with the help of the aroma of a broken spirit. One of the students is Hannah, the best student of the clan, and the identity of the second is unknown to him, but the girl called him Brother Alan. The unknown figure with red eyes said that he did not expect such a weakling to defeat Hannah. As for this Alan, the gentleman has never heard of him. He must be someone insignificant. A gloomy figure appeared. It was a hooded man with a scar on his cheek who had bright, expressive red eyes. He said that his servant did a great job this time. The owner of the inn began to sob and ask about his wife and children. The gloomy, unknown person reassured the old man and told him not to worry because they were alive and well. Right now, he would take him to them. The owner of the inn was delighted at the gentleman's mercy and began to thank him. But at the same moment, the old man's chest was struck by lightning, which killed him on the spot. The gloomy hooded man laughed and shouted that this was the last victim and everything was about to end. Having finished laughing, he called out to the third and fourth, who immediately landed behind the man. He ordered them to go to the inn and capture the two swordsman clan disciples. Meanwhile, dear Hannah began to gradually come to her senses and open her eyes. She lay on the bed, and Alan sat next to her and waited for the girl to wake up. Suddenly, Hannah stood up abruptly and began shouting that they needed to run away from here because it was dangerous here. Alan still sat with a calm expression and looked at the frightened girl. Her sanity gradually began to return, and she began to realize how ridiculous she now looked. She asked Alan why he was okay because he should have lost consciousness before her. The guy replied that when he sleeps, unlike Hannah during meditation, he does not use spiritual power, so the aroma of a broken spirit did not affect him at all. But Alan had to remain still for a long time for the scent to dissipate, and Hannah came to her senses. In fact, it is difficult for monks below the 5th level of the Purple Palace to resist this poison. Alan told the girl that her social experience was too small, and she should be more careful. If she had gone on the mission herself, the consequences would have been catastrophic. The girl bowed before Alan and thanked him for saving her. In the future, she swore that she would be more careful. Meanwhile, the guy brewed aromatic tea. He handed her tea and told her to drop politeness and drink some tea and warm up. Hannah was very embarrassed, feeling guilty about the incident, but thanked her brother Alan for the drink. There are rumors that Brother Alan is just an ordinary lazy person who doesn't know how to do anything and doesn't strive for anything. But Hannah never expected that he would not only say a few words to her, but also reveal the secrets of cultivation. All this time he was so attentive to everything, even saved her life. Excellent character, pleasant appearance. It's a pity that his level is not enough. Immediately the girl shuddered and caught herself thinking that she should not think about such things. Alan, meanwhile, turned to her and asked how she was feeling. The girl laughed and thanked the guy for his concern, saying that she was fine. Meanwhile, a strange purple flash appeared in the night sky. Two unknown fighters, overflowing with power, were heading straight towards the room where Alan and Hannah were. The best student immediately sensed the approach of the enemy. She pushed the guy aside and pulled out her sword, shouting that the killer was coming right here. Hannah turned to her brother Alan and told him to hide. There was no need to force Alan. He was already heading to his bed and said that since Hannah was already better, she should deal with it herself, because his working hours were over. Hannah went to the killers because anyway, these two are much stronger than Brother Alan, and if he gets involved, there will only be more problems. The girl was left alone with her opponents and was already waiting for their approach on the street. She gripped her blade tightly and shouted that it was no coincidence that they came here. A huge blue whirlwind created by Hannah's sword rushed towards the opponents and knocked down their flight path. Two unknown people landed with a crash in the nearby forest. The sophisticated girl instantly landed where a dark aura wafted from the ground. Standing in front of her were two people from the fourth clan of the Eastern Wasteland, the Purple Spirit Clan. Hannah didn't understand why the Purple Spirit Clan's disciples attacked them, so she asked what they were doing here. But they didn't answer, and their eyes looked especially strange. They were black. These two were bloody puppets. Their souls were consumed by magic, turning them into weak-willed dolls. This is the magic of the demon sect. Apparently, the disappearance of an entire village is also their doing. The strength of these two is equivalent to the third or fourth level of the Purple Palace, and you need to be careful. Hannah, covered in blue chakra, slowly landed and said that they upset her. The girl took out her striking blade and summoned her sword technique. Then she used a powerful ability, clouds breaking the moon, and everything around began to fly into pieces. A powerful wave created by the sword headed towards the opponents. But the girl and the guy were able to deftly jump away and dodge her attack. However, this was not the end, and Hannah commanded her blade to dissipate. After this, the blue blade immediately split into two parts and flew towards the enemies. The targets were immediately hit, and small flashes from the explosions ran through their bodies. The cut and beaten fighters lost their strength and fell to the ground. Meanwhile, Alan watched the battle. He was surprised how Hannah was able to easily separate the light from the sword. But apparently the force of the blow has also decreased, by the way. It's much more convenient to watch the fight this way. You don't even need to open your eyes. However, these two definitely did not plan to give up so easily. With difficulty, the girl rose to her hands and tried to stand up. She called Hannah sick and said she couldn't do that to them. The best student realized that these guys had not completely become bloody puppets. Apparently, there was still a trace of self-awareness in their heads. The subordinate girl got angry and shouted that she would kill Hannah for what she did to them. She jumped towards the girl and swung her staff, concentrating her purple chakra. The two girls clashed in battle. Hannah was able to block the staff's attack in time with her sword. However, the block was not easy for her. Hannah was surprised that her opponent could wield such a formidable weapon so easily. The enraged girls continued to attack each other, but no one wanted to give in. The air around them became electrified. The blows became faster and faster, so much so that at one moment their outlines were difficult to distinguish. Hannah could not understand what kind of strength her opponent had. The girl's hands even went numb from such blows. And the purple girl continued to attack and twirled her staff over her head to again try to defeat her rival. She gathered a huge amount of chakra and shot a magical stream towards Hannah. Meanwhile, Hannah realized that everything was about to end. Her sword was also charged for the next attack. Alan was happy for the girl because, in such a short time, she managed to study her opponent, which was to be expected from the best student. Even though they are on the fourth level of the Purple Palace, now they are just puppets. Their consciousness is sealed, so they can only fight with the help of instincts. Hannah closed her eyes and tried to concentrate to gather all her chakra for one powerful blow. A powerful stream of mana formed around the girl, which was so huge that it went like a column into the sky. Seeing such power, the purple girl was afraid. But Alan was worried about Hannah because it seems his sister is unaware of the danger. The guy took in his hand a leaf of a tree that flew into his window and decided that this would be enough. After gathering enough chakra, Hannah summoned her striking sword technique. She drew her sword, and a powerful wave of energy was sent at the speed of sound towards the purple girl. She tried to protect herself by forming a shield with her chakra. However, the shield was too weak compared to the enormous chakra power that the best swordsman student had summoned. After the battle, the purple girl lay in a pile of collapsed rocks, and Hannah was thinking about how to quickly rid these fighters of the spell. But the beauty did not notice that behind her, the second fighter raised his fan. He waved his weapon, and immediately a purple lightning, sharp as a needle, rushed towards the girl's back. Hannah turned around because she realized what had happened, but it was already too late. She only managed to create a small shield and try to protect herself. However, the shield was too weak and thin, and the purple blade easily broke the defense and was aimed straight at the girl's eyes. But suddenly a leaf that flew in like lightning repelled the attack and changed the trajectory of the blow, protecting Hannah. The purple blade flew past the girl's head and crashed into the mountain, creating a huge explosion there. The wind blew and blew her beautiful hair, and for a moment she realized that someone had just saved her. One of the purple warriors was sitting in front of the girl, and she knew that if she missed such a blow, the injury would be very serious. But she didn't know what kind of green light it was that saved her life, and she still has to find out. Hannah approached the enemy with lightning speed and went behind his back. She hit the guy's neck with the hilt of her sword and easily knocked him out. After some time, the girl returned to Alan's room and sat the two prisoners on chairs, who were unconscious. Alan praised the student, saying that she was able to cope with everything successfully. But the girl was haunted by one question. She tried to ask about him, but the guy immediately said that he had been lying in the room all this time. Then he smiled carefreely and asked what happened and what was bothering her so much. The girl shrugged it off and replied that nothing had happened, but she herself thought that with his level, he would hardly be able to do something like that, so there's no point in asking Alan about it. She also said that while the spirit of these guys is still alive, they should hurry up and return them to the clan. They need to ask the elders to cleanse their hearts and expel the evil formation from them so that they stop being puppets. But if they leave, the demon clansmen will run away and do their dirty deeds elsewhere. Alan stood up and said that for the sake of the people and the 3 days off, he would try to do something. Hannah was surprised that the guy began to concentrate chakra and asked what exactly he was going to do. Alan replied that he would use his divine sense to penetrate their minds and expel the formation. Hannah panicked and shouted that the guy was crazy because this is a very difficult practice. The slightest carelessness can lead to complete destruction of the soul. The guy calmed her down, asking her not to worry, and extended his hands to the heads of the prisoners. But seeing this, Hannah panicked even more because he wants to turn them from puppets at the same time, and this is even more difficult. Alan answered her that saving a person is tantamount to putting out a fire. The faster the better. A little time passed, and the purple girl opened violet eyes that were once black. Her brother was happy that Sarah had finally woken up. The girl began to rub her tired eyes, trying to wake up completely. But then her consciousness finally returned to her, and she turned towards our heroes. Seeing Alan and Hannah, she asked if they were students of the Sword Clan. Hannah formally greeted Sarah and introduced herself, as well as her companion Alan. The brother began to calm the girl down, saying that this was the best student of their clan, and they saved them. The guys were able to rescue them from the trap set by the elder of the demon clan. Alan asked Sarah to tell us in more detail how this happened. The girl bowed her eyes and began to tell this sad story. A week ago, he and Brian, on orders, went to the village to investigate the disappearance of residents. They asked around and traced it to a strange place in the forest. In it, the elder of the demon clan used the blood of the villagers for a sacrifice. In the end, they fell into a trap that he had prepared in advance. All these demons and images created by the elder suppressed the consciousness of the fighters. They ended up becoming puppets of the elder and could do nothing more about it. Therefore, the first thing Sarah did was to thank her new friend for saving her. Hannah began to wave her off and tell the girl not to thank her. After all, she didn't do anything, but the one who saved the guys was this lazy brother Alan. Sarah turned towards Alan and thanked him, saying that they would definitely repay their debt. Hannah stood shyly behind the carefree guy and thought about what happened. He had just managed to free 2 people from the curse of the bloody puppet at once. It happened so quickly that it seemed as if he didn't even bother, surprising his best student. Usually this spell affects the deepest corners of consciousness. Getting rid of it without harming a person is like finding a needle in a haystack. Not even all elders manage to get rid of it. After using the technique, Hannah immediately asked Alan when he was able to master such a complex technique. The guy replied that earlier he was whiling away time in the elder's pavilion and accidentally came across a fragment of a scroll of practices for manipulating spiritual thoughts. He found it very interesting, so he studied it. The information amazed Hannah more and more. He even found not a whole scroll, but just a fragment, and was able to learn such a technique. Suddenly, her memories were interrupted by Alan, who said that in order to save the guys, he needed to use resources and artifacts almost worth 30,000 high-grade spirit stones. The girl puffed out her cheeks angrily, thinking that the guy probably did it by accident, and he would never have had that much courage. Sarah looked at Alan and realized that he was far from stupid. Therefore, she happily agreed to make up for everything as soon as they returned to their clan. Hannah was amazed that they actually agreed, while Alan smiled triumphantly. It is now recognized that the formation of purifying the heart and destroying evil that can dispel the spell of the bloody puppet requires at least 50,000 stones. So 30,000 is a good price for friendship. Alan made a nice face and asked them not to rush because their clans were friends with each other, so it was their duty to help them. He also asked the two to remember the details of their abduction. Sarah said that the man's name is Lloyd. His combat power is not very great, and she could cope with him on her own. But he is very good at using formations and poisons, which is why the couple was able to get caught so easily. Alan delighted them by saying that if this is the case, then he has a special elixir that can make them immune to poisons for 3 hours. He will give it to the 3 fighters, and they will defeat the elder. Sarah's morale increased, and she shouted that if she was immune to the poisonous incense, she would kill this opponent in a matter of minutes. But then she again remembered all the words that Alan said. She asked why only the 3 of them would go. Would Alan really stay here and not go with them? The guy bowed his head and replied that he actually needed too much spiritual power to save them. Therefore, he will have to sleep to recover, while Hannah could barely restrain herself from punching this lazy guy. The purple couple apologized, saying that they were too blind to see Brother Alan's hard work. They decided that the three of them would cope while Alan rested. Meanwhile, Hannah realized that the lazy man had again deceived everyone in order to do nothing. After some time, a new team set out to search for the demon elder. Sarah looked at the small blue sphere and asked if this was really the magic elixir that Brother Alan was talking about. Hannah told her that they should believe him because he had already saved them several times. After these words, all three fighters took the magic pill. Sarah noticed that the elixir melted pleasantly in the mouth and was no different from ordinary pills. Brian added that it was not that he did not trust Alan, but his level of cultivation was very low. The team continued to walk through the forest. The moon had already appeared in the sky, and it became somehow too quiet around. Hannah took up her sword, noticing that something was wrong here. Brian confirmed her words by saying that there was not a single living soul here. Sarah began to panic. She guessed what had happened. An unknown gloomy voice confirmed their guesses, saying that they were on his territory. Hannah reacted to the enemy with lightning speed and sent a whirlwind of sword in his direction. The whirlwind blades immediately struck several eyes, but there was nothing on that side. The tree crowns dispersed, and she saw a strange swamp that was not there. Brian assumed that these were parts of dead creatures that were dealt with here. Hannah asked if the boys had seen the person who had just spoken to them. But suddenly, a gloomy figure in a cloak standing behind the girl answered her that he was here. The elder of the demon clan, Lloyd, drove the prey into his trap. The heroes turned around, and Sarah shouted that it was the one who caught them then. Lloyd asked how they managed to get rid of his curse so quickly. Apparently, the best student of the Sword Clan has secret treasures that can lift his curse. Lloyd was also wondering why there were only 3 fighters. He assumed that one of them was scared when he found out that he was behind all this. Sarah got angry and shouted to the villain that Alan was not here because she could handle such a dummy herself. After these words, the girl directed her first attack at Lloyd, and the battle began. The stones on the ground where the impact occurred began to crumble, mixed with purple energy. In this dust raised from the ground, Sarah tried to see where her enemy was. In the middle of the dark fog, Lloyd appeared, who told the girl that she had already lost. She had fallen for his trick. Brian immediately appeared behind the demon and shouted to the man that he was no longer a tenant. Swinging his fan, he aimed his needle-sharp spell at Lloyd's head. But he easily repelled it by saying that although they are the best students of their clans, they are still fools. Then he smiled and asked if they liked the smell. Brian and Sarah immediately realized that right now they were inhaling poison. Hannah also did not stand aside and attacked the dark bubble in which Lloyd was located. The master just as easily repelled her attack while continuing to taunt them. But suddenly he noticed that the blue lightning did not dissipate. She, like a swift wind, continues to break through his dark bubble. Eventually, the blade's whirlwind broke through Lloyd's defenses and an explosion was heard. 3 fighters were already in the air and were waiting for their opponent. The dust from the explosion cleared, and Hannah saw a small hole where Lloyd was standing. She became angry, realizing that they had missed the villain. But at that very second, the air turned scarlet, and a dark fog formed around the heroes. It was poisonous incense. Lloyd emerged from the poisonous fog, and he really had his own tricks. The master hung in the air right above our heroes and sprayed his crimson mist. He laughed and shouted that it was useless for the soldiers to run away anywhere because they had already inhaled his poison. It only takes 10 breaths, and they will immediately turn into bloody puppets and become his faithful servants. However, nothing happened, and the guys stood and smiled. At that moment, Lloyd realized that something was wrong. And then he realized that he was missing the 3rd fighter, who was already swinging his huge staff behind the master's back. Sarah took advantage of the moment and hit Lloyd on the back. The force of the blow was colossal, and the master immediately spat out a lot of blood. Then he rushed towards the ground at the speed of sound until he crashed into it. Brian also wanted revenge. He prepared his fan to finish off the enemy. Swinging his weapon, several sharp chakra needles rushed towards the prone Lloyd. The purple needles mercilessly hit their opponent in all places of his body. The demon elder bled, his most terrible weapon no longer working. He could hardly stand on his hands and bled while trying to understand how this happened. The master raised his bloody gaze to the team. He did not find an answer to his question, so he asked them why his poison did not work on them. And the squad of fighters only mocked the once strong villain. Sarah was happy that Alan's elixir was really so strong. Resistance to poisons would help them deal with all the members of the demon sect. Lloyd knew that this poison was even stronger than the previous one, and even if you held your breath, it would be absorbed into the skin. And nothing short of his special antidote can dispel it. Then why doesn't he take these warriors? Apparently they have some kind of secret of their own. Hannah said it was time to finish with him, and prepared to use her sword technique. But Lloyd was not going to give up so easily. He wiped his blood and said that this was far from over. The demon elder immediately jumped and took off from the ground. Having covered a great distance with lightning speed, he said that the game had just begun. Flying into the sky, he summoned the bloody flames of the heavenly formation and covered the entire area below him. The girls who got into the area panicked and tried to understand what was happening. Lloyd scoffed and reminded them that they had entered his territory. He ordered the first to get rid of them, and at that very second, something began to form from the dirt behind them. Brian turned in horror to see a man begin to form from the mud, a powerful, angry demon who was ready to tear everyone apart. The team realized that this was the bloody puppet of the 6th level of the Purple Palace. Lloyd continued to taunt, telling the guys that they would definitely not be returning home today. Speaking of the house, Lloyd sent the second one there. He has the 5th level of the Purple Palace, and he will deal with the coward who is hiding there. Hannah immediately began to worry about Alan, because he was too weak to cope with such an opponent. Meanwhile, Alan was sleeping peacefully and was not at all interested in the outcome of the battle. And a terrible demon with 6 eyes had already entered his house through the window. But to his surprise, he found no one on the bed, and there was not a soul in the house. Sly Alan was lying in the next room and had absolutely no intention of working overtime. He turned to go to sleep, but immediately an explosion thundered behind him. It was a trap that Alan had left for the demon. But to his surprise, the enemy was not torn apart, and there was a silhouette behind him. It was a demon who was struggling in agony and screaming because he had received many injuries. Actually, no, the trap was too weak for him. Alan had to get out of bed. He realized that the demon would not be able to return until he caught him. The guy didn't understand whether it was really necessary to involve him in all this. Meanwhile, a fierce battle broke out in the forest. Hannah concentrated her power and used her sword technique to create a hurricane of water. Meanwhile, the bloody puppet began to form a clot of energy to repel the attack. Then he put up an impenetrable shield, and the blades of water crashed into it without causing damage. But suddenly Sarah appears behind the monster, who took advantage of the situation and the fact that the enemy was distracted. The girl tried to attack him with her staff, but the bloody puppet successfully blocked the blow. The monster then took hold of Sarah's staff, and with a powerful movement of his hand, he threw the girl away from him. Brian was angry and summoned one of his techniques, the sealing purple chains. Approaching from behind, the sealing chains seemed to have successfully begun to bind their enemy. But the monster was not so weak. He gathered his energy and began to scream with all his might. The chains that bound him broke, but Hannah managed to take advantage of the moment and strike the body of the immobilized enemy. The girl was focused and confident that this time she succeeded. Indeed, the monster's body was cut into 2 parts. People cannot survive such wounds, but the bloody puppet had nothing to do with it. After separation, he immediately landed on his severed part and fused together. Hannah couldn't believe her eyes when she saw this. Meanwhile, the monster decided to attack his opponents and jumped towards them. The first to be hit was Brian, who immediately flew away, covered in blood. Then Hannah was attacked and was also unable to evade. Sarah, noticing the loss of her comrades, immediately shouted their names. Blood was leaking from under Brian's head. Seeing this, Sarah became angry. No one could touch her brother. The girl jumped from her seat with lightning speed and landed behind the bloody monster. Her rage gave her strength, and she was able to hit the monster's back with her staff. However, the monster that received the blow jumped away from her to a safe distance. This time was enough for Hannah to come to her senses. The girl landed next to Sarah and said that this guy is so strong that with his endless regeneration, they will simply fizzle out over time. Sarah said with a serious face that she had a secret way to destroy him. Hannah was happy because there was hope, but Sarah needed time to gain strength. So the purple girl asked Hannah to buy her some time. The best student prepared for battle, saying that she could rely on her. Lloyd taunted them by saying that if they have any aces up their sleeves, then let them use them now. These puppets are a masterpiece of his collection of bloody techniques, so they will all come to an end soon. Suddenly, the master felt something strange. Number 2 did not move, and the master thought that apparently he had finished with the coward too quickly. However, everything was not so simple. The bloody puppet was tied with Alan's blue bonds. The guy looked at the bloody puppet and said that the elders should under no circumstances find out about this. But he just wanted to sleep peacefully without any unnecessary noise. And if the puppet does not do this, then he will give her something in return. After these words, Alan immediately grabbed the puppet by the hair. He slowly walked to the window holding the monster by the hair. The guy looked into the distance, where a fierce battle was breaking out, and saw only a strange red dome. Brother Alan raised the shackled bloody puppet like a spear and began to take aim. Then he threw the monster towards the dome with all his strength and shouted at him to get back out and let him sleep. Because of such force of the throw, the monster flew into the sky so far that it was no longer visible. Alan, meanwhile, turned around and thought that he had a little more time to rest. He wanted to go see if there were still free rooms here, because he needed to sleep a little more. Meanwhile, Hannah continued to buy time, and many puppet blows flew at her. The girl tried to block the fists with her sword. But their strength was great, and Hannah's strength was decreasing, so the girl flew a short distance. She was all wounded, but she didn't really have a choice. The girl did not understand why this bloody puppet was becoming stronger and stronger. Lloyd told the girl that since she was still holding on, it was not for nothing that she was called the best student of the Sword Clan, but all this would soon end. He ordered his first blood puppet to attack the girl. The monster immediately obeyed and attacked Hannah with great speed. He gathered furious energy around himself and jumped into the air above the girl. Hannah closed her eyes and mentally asked everyone for forgiveness because for the first time in her life she was afraid. But suddenly, behind Lloyd, some strange red flash appeared in the sky. Lloyd felt something was wrong and turned around. At that moment, a red object was rushing towards him at the speed of sound. The bloody monster thrown by Hannah and the demon elder were stunned by this turn of events. When the dust from the fall cleared, they saw the second and first bloody puppet, which were broken and lying in a pile of dirt. Only now did Lloyd realize what had happened, and he was furious. He couldn't believe that this was even possible. And Hannah was glad that if the second puppet was here, then everything was all right with Brother Alan. Apparently, one of the elders came and was able to protect the guy. Lloyd thought the same thing, and he knew that if the elders came here, it could become a problem for him. Therefore, he must hurry and finish the fight as quickly as possible. The master used the ability to enhance the bloody puppets, and the monsters came to life again. One of the puppets recovered and jumped on the defenseless Hannah. The girl tried to take a defensive stance, but her feet got stuck in the mud created by the monster. But Sarah came to the girl's aid in time and apologized for the fact that the student had to wait for her for so long. Sarah's eyes were filled with rage. They shimmered with a purple light similar to sparks of true thunder. Lloyd was shocked to see the fourth level of the Purple Palace. This girl cannot resist him. However, Sarah used the purple shadow technique and easily blocked the blood puppet's attack. Her power was so great that the explosion from the staff was visible from a long distance, so far that the purple glow even reached sleeping Alan. But the guy was ready for this, and his night mask did not let the light through. Morning came, and our main lazy man calmly got out of bed. He went to the window to enjoy the fresh air and the rays of the just-risen sun. It seemed like this was how every good morning should begin. But not everything was so wonderful. A huge explosion in the distance disturbed the landscape, and Alan thought that today was some kind of explosive day. Apparently, Sister Hannah and the others fought all night long. This elder turned out to be not such an easy opponent. Alan slowly put his hand into his pocket. He took out his watch to see what time it was. It was time to work. Meanwhile, the girl stood near a large patch of mud. Everything in the area was destroyed, stones were crushed, and trees were uprooted. Charged, Sarah looked at the smoldering body of the bloody puppet. Suddenly, the girl fell to her knees, exhausted. They had been fighting all night and were pretty exhausted. Hannah, looking at Sarah trembling in pain, told her that her technique was indeed very powerful. Suddenly, Brian appeared behind her, who explained that this is their secret technique. The accumulated power breaks out in one breath. But the disadvantage of the technique is obvious. This technique is too energy-consuming. Sarah, who could hardly stand on her feet, said that this time everything worked out, and it was all thanks to Hannah. The bloodied girl shrugged it off, saying that she was just doing her job. Their pleasant exchange of pleasantries was interrupted by Lloyd, who shouted that they were three freaks. Exhausted, Sarah realized that the battle was not over yet. The main enemy remained. The Furious Master said that the team had practically destroyed number 1, which he had spent several decades creating. Sarah barely raised her staff in preparation for battle, but her brother said that there was no need to try to fight because the girl's spiritual power was almost exhausted. Suddenly, Hannah said that she would take on this opponent because she had rested a little while Sarah was fighting the monster. The powerful warrior began to accumulate her energy for an attack. Lloyd also began to form bloody hands, shouting that the trio of them would be buried here today. Powerful hands made of dark matter aimed at the small, fragile girl. Hannah used her sword technique and a stream of water like a whip burst out from his blade. The blade, as powerful as a needle, pierced the black magic of the demon elder. Moving further, it reached the place where a gap had formed in the dome. And the claws created by Lloyd in the meantime almost achieved their goal. But it was not for nothing that the girl was the best student. She cut the bloody magic into small pieces with lightning speed. Lloyd glared at Hannah, noting that she was quite strong. He was wondering if the girl could handle his other technique. However, the dome on which Lloyd stood suddenly began to crack. Then it simply burst, crumbling into thousands of small fragments. Only now did Lloyd realize that the girl was aiming at the previously made hole. The master did not expect that Hannah would have the strength to do something like this. But he was not going to give up, after which the master suddenly shot himself right in the head. He absorbed the power of the dome and his blood magic completely into his body. Having squeezed the blood to the limit, the master summoned a pentagram, which he filled with the remnants of his power. Hannah realized that things were bad. It was obvious that the master wanted to use a secret technique. But suddenly her impulse was stopped by drops of blood that hit the girl in the back. The demon elder sealed her acupuncture points to release spiritual energy. But that was not all. The faces of the purple allies were also subjected to a strange bloody attack. Then the allies opened their eyes, and Hannah saw that they had turned black. The master's bloody puppet technique was not so easy to dispel as it turned out. The demon elder ordered number 3 and number 4 to capture the disciple. Lloyd told her that although she was talented, she was like a little child in front of him. But such power should not be wasted, so Hannah will become his new number 1. The master summoned his bloody hand to apply the seal and said that her blood would make a wonderful offering. The claws rushed towards Hannah, and the girl mentally apologized to the elders for the fact that their best student was defeated by the devil's spawn. The sweet beauty burst into tears, remembering her brother Alan, because she promised him to be careful. The claws almost reached their goal, but suddenly someone shouted at him to stop. A man hung behind Lloyd and ordered the master to let the girl go. The elder of the demons turned around, and the tearful Hannah immediately recognized the hero. Lloyd didn't understand where the guy came from here. He began to look around, assuming that the same elder who killed number 2 was here. Brother Alan told the master not to look back because the guy came alone. Hannah began to panic and scream for Brother Alan to run as fast as he could because he couldn't defeat him. Lloyd smiled. He knew that Alan was not his opponent. Since the guy came himself, the master decided to start with him first. Carefree Alan snapped his fingers and said one word: destruction. At that same second, Lloyd was attacked by purple energy that came out of nowhere. He couldn't believe what just happened. Number 3 appeared behind him and used her magical powers. This was impossible. Lloyd's reactivated blood puppet formation was several times stronger than normal. No matter how powerful Alan was, it could not be easily dispelled. However, everything was like that. And Brian, who had regained his sanity, had already directed his technique of sealing chains at the enemy. The guy's sister also did not stand aside and was already waving her staff behind the chained Lloyd. The girl shouted to the old man to get down to the ground, and after these words she slammed him into the dirt with a strong blow. Bloody smoke emanated from the resulting crater where Lloyd landed. Hannah turned to her lazy brother and looked at him blankly. The girl was shocked by what he just did. How is it that the weakest swordmaster was able to defeat the elder of the demon clan with just a snap of his fingers? Sarah asked Brother Alan what exactly he did. The guy replied that it was just a little trick that he had thought out in advance. It all started when he extracted the bloody seed from the bodies of the two. He discovered that his rhizome struck the depths of the children's souls. Alan was afraid of damaging them and therefore extracted only the seed. The sharp blades of the sword cut the seed around the rhizome like thin branches. This meant that they could still be manipulated at any time because the root was still sealed in their souls. Therefore, Alan left several threads of the sword in their minds. As soon as the elder of the demon clan tries to activate the seed again, the threads will stop his attempt. At a critical moment, this could turn the tide of the battle. The purple warriors immediately bowed their heads and thanked Alan, saying that they admired him. Hannah asked why Alan didn't tell her about this, in case the plan would have failed. The guy replied that everything worked out for the girl in the end, but she was already starting to get upset, feeling useless. Then he encouraged her by saying that if it weren't for her, nothing would have worked out for him. After all, Hannah is the very person who can defeat the elder of the demon clan. An enthusiastic girl asked if the guy was lying. Alan, meanwhile, thought that if he had told her everything, then perhaps the girl would not have had enough acting skills to fool this elder. Sarah also supported Hannah, saying that if it weren't for her, they would not have been able to deal with the master so easily. The best student was delighted and agreed with everyone, and Alan shook his head affirmatively. The girl looked at the guy and thought that despite his low level, his wisdom, strategic thinking, and insight were excellently developed. Alan, meanwhile, recalled that but suddenly they heard a loud rumble and felt powerful chakra. The bloody formation was activated again, which meant that the battle was not over yet. The elder was still alive, and right now bloody energy was gathering around him. Alan was disappointed. He knew that early leave sounded too good to be true. The tortured, scarred elder was on his knees and trying to get up. His bloody creations began to rise, and something began to emerge from the man's body. Alan watched all this from above and did not understand what he was doing. A spear covered in black runes slowly began to emerge from the demon elder's belly. Hannah realized that things were bad, and she needed to stop the appearance of the object, so she used her secret technique. The laughing villain, meanwhile, rose to his feet and grabbed his spear. The girl used the sword-breaking technique. Many lightning bolts rushed towards the master. But he only laughed and said that it was too late. He raised his dark spear, and Hannah's attack was immediately blocked with ease. The elder smiled ominously and said that his formation was complete. The girl did not know what to do. This was her last chance to destroy the enemy because she no longer had any strength left. At that very second, Brian said that it was time to retreat because their strength was not enough to fight the master. Hannah agreed to this and the trio tried to escape. However, Alan said that the guys should leave first and he would catch up with them later. Hannah turned around and asked what the guy was waiting for. She needed to leave quickly. But Lloyd didn't want to just let them go. He summoned a huge projection that stretched its hands towards the heroes. In a split second, the summoned monster grabbed all four heroes in a tight grip. Lloyd shouted that now he would show these pathetic insects the power of real poison. Sarah said that the master was able to catch her because her strength had run out, and Brian had lost all hope after realizing that the elder was invincible. Hannah looked at the monster and could not understand how he instantly jumped from the 5th level of the Purple Palace to the 8th level. Sarah didn't want to die like that, and her brother suggested that he became so strong because he absorbed his puppets. Lloyd told them that number 1 and number 2 were the best in his collection, and he didn't even think that the trio could beat them. Sarah said that even if number 1 was stronger than them, they could definitely cope with number 2, but now these three are one. Lloyd laughed and told the team that he was also a victim. He said that he was forcibly raised into a bloodthirsty soldier, then he raised his staff and it began to call for something. The guys did not understand what the master's words meant. Meanwhile, only one hero was not interested in the fight. He looked at his watch, and Hannah asked him what he was doing. Brian said that the ancient books say that demon warriors first appeared 10,000 years ago. Countless decent people were beheaded, and most of the lands began to belong to the demon clan. And only when the 5 clans united among themselves to resist them were they able to defeat the demon clan's troops and put an end to this disaster. Lloyd laughed again. He said that he had witnessed many things. He had seen blood spilled, souls taken by force. All of this helps shape warriors like him. And today, the team of heroes has the honor of becoming an offering to his bloody formation. But suddenly his solemn speech was interrupted by a disgusting sound. Lloyd didn't understand what the sound was, and Alan, meanwhile, was looking at his watch. His working hours are over and apparently he will have to work overtime. Lloyd did not understand the guy's words and asked him what it meant to work overtime. At that same second, a huge wave of energy flew towards the invincible demon elder. A powerful flow of chakra immediately knocked the master out of the summoned formation. The weakest student told Lloyd that his hour of death had come. Hannah was surprised to see such a powerful technique. She asked Alan if it was his doing, but the guy only answered that they needed to get out of here as quickly as possible. The girl wanted to object, but the hero said that they should get out of here as soon as possible and protect the village from attack. In a panic, Hannah asked the guy who defeated puppet number 2, they need to quickly call this elder here because they themselves cannot cope with this opponent. Hannah's comrades also supported Hannah, telling Alan that he shouldn't be brave because thanks to this formation, Lloyd's power has increased to at least the 8th level of the Purple Palace, so even with their common efforts they can't cope. But the hero, smiling, told his friends not to worry because it would all be over soon. Meanwhile, Lloyd, who had fallen to the ground, stood up. He did not understand what had just happened because the guy's level should not be enough to defeat him. The demon elder asked Alan what trick he used just now to stop him. Alan, mocking his opponent, replied that he did not need tricks to defeat such a weakling. Meanwhile, Hannah and her purple friends were heading towards the village. Sarah asked the girl why they left him there alone. She couldn't believe that the guy really knew a way to defeat such a formidable enemy, who at that moment directed his bloody chakra at Alan. The bloody lightning hit Alan directly. Sarah continued to say that the hero's level was too low and that demon would destroy him with one blow. Hannah told the girl that she didn't know why, but she trusted Alan, because since he left the mountain, all his decisions had been correct. The powerful lazy man repelled the attack with his blade and looked at Lloyd with the look of a bloodthirsty killer. The demon panicked. He wanted to know what he was going to do now. Meanwhile, the tired team arrived at the village, where everything was peaceful and calm. Hannah summoned an artifact similar to a pentagonal mirror. It was the castle of the heavenly spirit. The girl gathered her strength and threw it into the sky. The castle of the heavenly spirit flew in the air and hovered over the village, creating a blue, impenetrable shield around it. Seeing the blue dome, Alan was delighted. He told his opponent that now he could calmly attack him. Lloyd laughed villainously, amused by the confidence of such a weakling as Alan in his victory. The hero answered him that he wanted to say that if Lloyd still has an ace up his sleeve, then he needs to use it as soon as possible, because the demon will not have another chance. The student's excessive pathos enraged Lloyd, and he pointed his spear into the air, gathering powerful force. A bright scarlet dome, the center of which was a spear, fell on Alan. Lloyd called it a bloody blow with a halberd. The demon elder smiled because such an attack could not be easily avoided. But suddenly for the villain, Alan slowly landed in front of him, glowing with a blue aura. The guy mocked the enemy. He asked if Lloyd had any more attacks. The demon elder was filled with rage. He swung his halberd trying to hit Alan, but he dodged again. Then the villain summoned a huge bloody column that looked like a hurricane. The power was like hot magma flying around him. It was one of Lloyd's abilities, the demonic light of heaven. These red thunderstorms were visible even from the direction of the village. Sarah was stunned to see such powerful magic. That's what the power of a demon warrior is capable of. Meanwhile, poor Hannah was crying and praying that her brother Alan would survive. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Lloyd's laughter fell silent because Alan spoke to him. The guy asked the enemy what use was such a skill if Lloyd couldn't fully control its power. And at that same second, blue blades rushed towards the demon. The blades, like the claws of an enraged beast, cut through the bloody hurricanes summoned by Lloyd. The demon elder trembled. He saw his ability disappearing. It seemed like just a bad dream. This should be impossible. Alan must be using some kind of illusion. The guy, meanwhile, appeared out of thin air and asked if Lloyd knew how he was, a simple cultivator resisting him so easily. In fact, everything is extremely simple. The fact is that Alan specially sealed his kingdom. He never practiced in front of other people, fearing that if they knew his true level, disaster would be impossible to avoid. Alan easily repelled all the demon's attacks even without looking at him, and continued his story by saying that it was not becoming for a student of his clan to brag about his skills. After all, the higher your skills, the more problems fall on your head. Therefore, in order not to complicate his life, Alan was forced to hide his true abilities. Lloyd realized what trap he had fallen into. The demon tried to leave, shouting that the guy was just crazy and crazy. But Alan pulled the enemy's body towards him, saying that he would not let him go. Taking his sword out of its sheath, the hero said that Lloyd interrupts his rest time after time. In addition, he harmed his comrades, thereby forcing him to start work ahead of time. Lloyd tried to run away again, shouting that the guy shouldn't have come here. Alan's gaze was stern, because starting work ahead of time is an unforgivable sin. After these words, the hero released his striking sword technique at the enemy. A powerful flow of chakra, like a raging wave, passed through Lloyd and struck him. The clouds summoned by Lloyd dissipated, and the sun appeared from behind them. The battle was completed with one blow. The technique was so powerful that in the place where it passed, the earth split and a river formed. The powerful lazy man hung in the air and watched Lloyd's spear as it cooled down. Sarah, who was watching the battle, asked Hannah if they were really only at the level of the Purple Palace. After all, the strength of this sword is comparable to the strength of a cultivator who has long since crossed this level. It seemed that brother Alan was the elder of their clan. Meanwhile, Hannah was shocked by what she saw. It turns out that brother Alan had long surpassed the levels of all the students of their clan. The girl lowered her gaze. At that moment, she felt helpless in comparison with him. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of glass breaking. The power of Alan's sword was too great, and the dome began to crack. It was about to shatter into pieces. Hannah ordered her friends to hurry up and evacuate the villagers, and she would take care of the rest. Even though Hannah couldn't fight that demon, she would at least try to save those lives. The girl began to concentrate her energy. It was difficult for her to restrain the dome, when suddenly a man's hand appeared next to her hand. Seeing the familiar attire, Hannah was surprised. Next to her stood brother Alan, who with his strength helped the girl restore the protective barrier. A moment later, all the cracks in the barrier were healed, and not a single resident in the city was injured. The worried girl turned to the guy and shouted his name. After some time, the residents were on their knees thanking their four saviors. The purple fighters waved to the residents, and meanwhile, Hannah wanted to talk to Alan. She looked at the guy with pitiful eyes and asked why he didn't tell her earlier that he was so strong. Brother Alan made a stupid face and said that he did not understand what the girl was talking about. After all, he defeated this demon only thanks to the talisman that the elder of their clan gave him. This answer stunned the guy's entire team. Hannah thought that Alan had released this sword, but the guy turned on his acting skills and said that such a weakling like him could not get such strength. And only thanks to the desperate resistance of his team, he managed to activate the power of the talisman that the master gave him. And besides, Alan believes that the guys exhausted the demon and the sword only finished him off. The guy shouted with enthusiasm that he was just lucky, nothing more. Something didn't add up here. Hannah asked how the guy managed to evade the demon's attack so skillfully. Alan was caught on this question, and he did not know what to answer, and the girl just looked at him intently. Alan then responded that his main specialty was actually dodging attacks, so dodging wasn't that much of a problem for him. He looked at the beauty and added that she knew that their master was the best in the clan. It was his strength that killed the demon. But Hannah did not let up. She asked about that protective barrier, because a student of this level cannot stabilize such a formation. Alan reached into his robe to take out something and said that he used it. There was a green stone in his hand. It was the jade of the hidden spirit. Hidden spirit. Jade is a stone that can store spiritual power and call upon it at any time. Due to its high cost and rarity, it is not popular. But Hannah still didn't believe him. The hero's story was quite smooth, but her intuition suggested that something was wrong. Suddenly, Alan put his hand on her head and told the girl not to give free rein to her imagination, because if he was really strong, then the master and elder would have known about it long ago. Alan also believes that Hannah is the best student in the clan. There's definitely no doubt about that. From such words, the cutie became embarrassed and shouted that Alan was using a sudden attack with compliments on her. Speaking of that demon, Sarah wanted to know what ultimately happened to him. Alan replied that his body is full of magical power. It is impossible to even touch it now. Therefore, the hero created a formation to suppress it. Sometime later, our heroes were at the burial site of Lloyd, where the suppression of his power was almost complete. The demon clan was so enraged that they began to train such soldiers. Hannah believed that they should inform the other clans about this as soon as possible, so that they could take precautions in advance. Alan agreed with her, but first she needed to fully deal with the demon, when suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a force escaping from the halberd. The chakra bubble burst, and the power of the bloody spear absorbed Alan's formation. Hannah was horrified, and the hero became wary. They realized that something had gone wrong. The bloody spear began to summon a strange circle of fire and blood. The power of the demon awakened. Alan reacted instantly and tried to strike the enemy's chakra clot. The rest of the heroes managed to jump away, and suddenly the spear in the demon's body disappeared along with the bloody chakra. Sarah realized that apparently their master had taken the demon from here, and Brian believed that now was not the time for chatter, and it was logical that the master would not just abandon the creation on which he had spent so much time and effort. But Hannah calmed the ardent fighters because they clearly did not have enough time and energy to pursue now. Alan, meanwhile, looked at his hand, from which his attack came out. He realized that he could not let the girl know how strong he really was. However, this formation that the hero left should be strong enough to stop Lloyd. Meanwhile, an unknown figure was in a strange place filled with a bloody aura, where he was sitting in the middle of candles emitting green light. He opened his mouth wide and absorbed all the bloody aura that was flying around him. This was the elder whom Alan defeated at the beginning of the story. He swore that next time he would tear him into thousands of small pieces, when suddenly his meal was interrupted by another gloomy figure who appeared behind the villain. The elder bowed his head in greeting to his master. The dark secret figure said that apparently Howard had already finished cultivating his body. Howard smiled and said that he couldn't do it without his master's help. Suddenly, the gentleman said that Lloyd was dead. This information shocked the elder. The unknown person said that he completed the formation before his death and created a demon embryo, however. When the master tried to take it away, another force did not allow him to do this. Now the fruit is in the Yun clan prefecture on their mountain range. The Lord ordered Howard to return it. He also gave 3 things to his subordinate, saying that these artifacts would help him in battle. Howard failed him last time. If he does it again, he will have to answer for his misdeeds. The elder bowed his knee and understood the order of his master. At this time, our heroes said goodbye to each other, because the enemy had disappeared without a trace, and the mission was over. Hannah and Alan looked at the purple comrades who had become their family for a short time. Sarah and Brian set off and talked along the way. Brian said that no one could have expected such a move from the demon clan. The demon's abilities already went far beyond their combat training. But Brian was most concerned not with them, but with the abilities of his brother Alan. Sarah was surprised by these words. She did not understand what was wrong with the hero, that her brother was worried about this. Brian told her that it was obvious that the guy was in control from the very beginning, starting from the moment he gave them pills that made them invulnerable to poisons. And what happened to the bloody formations during the battle? When they were ready to accept defeat, Brother Alan appeared and took the situation into his own hands. If not for him, the bloody formation would have covered them all. But it's true that after hearing the information from her brother, Sarah thought about it. However, that was not all. Brian asked if the girl remembered the pill that they took. He checked his body using the inner vision technique and found that it was as if he was wrapped from the inside by a protective sword technique. Apparently, what they swallowed was not an antidote, but a pill filled with a beam of sword energy. This is the only reason why the poisons could no longer affect them. The energy of the sword that was contained in that pill dissipated all the toxins that got inside. It seemed impossible, but if your sword skill is high enough, then it is theoretically possible. But one thing is not clear to Sarah. Since Alan is so powerful, why is he trying so hard to hide it? It seemed to Brian that the matter was that the hero was something of a secret weapon for his clan. Then Sarah asked if they should tell their leader about it. A couple of purple warriors looked at each other and mentally imagined the consequences. Brian decided that since Alan does not want to reveal his abilities, then they should remain silent, because the hero saved them, and therefore they should respect his choice. Still, the Sword Clan has an interesting talent. Apparently, the meeting of the clans next month will be really interesting. Meanwhile, Hannah looked at the strange golden stone and said that it was time to return. She turned to Alan, saying that the head told them not to linger, and the guy didn't seem to really listen to her. He smiled and said that these guys are very smart. Hannah asked who these very smart guys were, and Brother Alan grinned and said that it didn't matter. It was time for them to move forward. The hero decided that he should dissipate his sword energy. After all, if the head of their clan notices her, it will be a rather unpleasant situation. Heading home, Hannah suddenly turned to her brother Alan. A sweet girl asked me to tell her honestly if the guy had any secret power. To which Alan replied that he had no need to lie. He was just a newcomer to the 6th level of the Purple Palace. He was still far from a genius like Hannah. It seems that the girl expected such an answer and only exhaled in disappointment. Suddenly, a bolt of sharp sword energy flew into Alan's chest. Hannah stood in front of the hero with a serious face and drew her sword. She was serious. Her blow hit the guy right in the chest, tearing his clothes. Suddenly, behind the torn clothes, a strange book appeared. There was nothing holding the book back anymore, and to Alan's surprise, it fell out of his inner pocket. The guy tried to catch her, but Hannah managed to intercept the book in flight. The girl smiled triumphantly. Apparently, this is his diary. Now she will know the whole truth. She opened the book when suddenly on its cover she saw a girl and an inscription that said that she and her sister had a great time. Hannah's face immediately turned as red as possible from embarrassment and what she saw. Alan immediately snatched the book from the hands of the embarrassed girl, saying that he would explain everything. This is a fairly popular book. It's just a novel. Hannah said that she didn't think the guy was like that. Alan immediately explained that the picture on the cover was just to attract attention. In fact, it was a serious adventure story. Hannah suddenly grabbed the book to look, and on the next page she saw a passionate flirting girl, strewn with rose petals. She again became embarrassed and turned away sharply, and Alan shouted that she understood everything wrong. These were illustrations. They were needed to attract attention. It is actually a story about a young man who is part of a clan and his relationship with his female companions. This is an orthodox adventure story. It is very popular among monks and ordinary mortals. Updates are released every 3 months. Alan had to wait in line all night for this limited edition. It is very difficult to buy. Hannah pretended to believe it, saying that she would pay for the clothes she had ruined. But in reality, she was thinking that the guy did not dodge her blow. Apparently, he really did not have hidden strength. The girl said that she thinks that her brother should get less involved in such literature. In their clan, this kind of thing is called fiction and is prohibited. She looked sternly at the guy, adding that their head believes that this distracts from practice, and his brother, like no one else, should work harder on himself. Alan smiled sweetly and nodded, saying that this is exactly what he would do. The girl turned around sharply and said that it was time for them to move on, and the hero exhaled, because now all of Hannah's doubts about him should have evaporated. But suddenly, another sharp blade of energy flew towards him. This time, the blade flew straight into the book the guy was holding. Alan pressed the book to his chest protectively and repelled the attack. The force of energy that burst from his hand dissolved Hannah's chakra and flew towards the nearest mountain. Half the mountain was immediately destroyed. At that moment, the hero realized how much he had screwed up. Alan asked Hannah if she could pretend she didn't see it, to which the girl replied that despite her level, she couldn't just turn a blind eye to it. The guy hid his treasure in his bosom. This book failed him again. It's time for excuses. Alan admitted that he didn't tell Hannah something. The girl abruptly approached the guy and asked whether his skills greatly exceeded hers, to which Alan stood at attention and replied that they were only slightly superior. A malicious smile appeared on Hannah's face, and she said that she would keep the guy's secret, but he had to promise her something. Fearing for his secret and for what the girl would ask, he asked what she wanted. The sweet beauty's eyes sparkled with happiness. She asked her brother Alan to teach her sword techniques. But the hero was not delighted. He thought that this mission would help him get along with his sister and get 3 days off. But for some reason now he thought that he had screwed up badly, and meanwhile Hannah was burning with joy and waiting for the guy's answer. Alan pretended to think, answering that in principle he could teach her, but there was one but. The sparkling top student swore that she would keep her mouth shut. The guy need not worry. She flew up and said that she could not wait to return, and Alan mentally asked the head why everything turned out so against him. After some time, sad and eternally lazy Alan and the inspired student returned home. Our heroes entered the main hall to report to the elders. Hannah greeted the chief, elders, and masters. The men turned around and saw their favorite student and said that she had done an excellent job. The master thanked the girl for her hard work and asked whether she was injured anywhere. Alan lowered her head and quietly, without much enthusiasm, greeted the head, elders, and masters. In response, they only looked at the guy with contempt. The master asked if the guy on the mission had caused problems for Sister Hannah. If she had suffered while protecting the hero, then he was dead. The man hoped that Alan had made every effort to learn as much as possible from the girl. In his heart, the hero was very indignant, because if it weren't for him, they would no longer have their beloved student. Suddenly, the head rose from his chair and demanded that the master stop slandering Alan. After all, if he had not activated the talisman in time, they would not have defeated the elder of the demon clan. Alan smiled. It was not for nothing that he gave so much tea to his beloved friend. The elders looked at the master, who had Alan under his command, and it turns out that he is a real hero who saved the whole situation. The man said that it was only natural that he would give the protective talisman to his disciple. The other elders smiled, feeling the master's strength. They praised him for destroying the elder of the demon clan with just one talisman. However, the master clearly remembered that the talisman he gave to Alan was barely above the first level of the Purple Palace. But Lloyd, the elder of the demon clan, was rumored to be at the 5th level. Is it possible that the master gave Alan the wrong talisman, and that's why he defeated the elder? They were all interrupted by the head of the clan, who announced that they were gathered here for only one reason, because their world would soon face a crisis. He asked Hannah to tell everyone what happened after she met the elder of the demon clan. This information is extremely valuable both for the clan and for the entire alliance. The girl immediately agreed. Towards evening, the meeting ended, and a tired Alan leaving the building was happy about it. Starting tomorrow, he will finally be free. He needs to plan his weekend well. However, the guy's joy was interrupted by a sweet female voice that called him by name. Hannah, anticipating new knowledge, reminded the guy that he must teach her as they agreed. Alan tried to fight off the crazy beauty by saying that he had plans for the coming days, but the girl said that she could not wait any longer because she could learn from such a powerful person as Alan. The guy tried to use his acting skills by saying that they were both tired after a difficult mission, and he needed to rest before he started training her. But Hannah was also no slouch and, making kitten eyes, began to cry, saying that her brother slept all night, and she fought. She's a fragile girl and doesn't complain. Why then does Alan complain? But you won't win the guy. He said he was tired because he made a big contribution to the victory. Then, crazy Hannah grabbed him by the clothes and threatened that if he didn't help her, she would tell everyone about their relationship. Alan panicked because they were at the main entrance. He asked the girl not to say nonsense. What other relationship? But the girl shouted that she didn't care, because he himself was avoiding responsibilities. She said that her brother was a fraud. Suddenly, the hero agreed, and the sweet beauty immediately calmed down. Alan said that she could come to him tonight, and then he would teach her a lesson. But after that, Hannah should leave him alone. The girl agreed with her eyes sparkling with joy. She must also remember to keep a secret. If someone sees Hannah going to Alan late at night, then all the monks will chop him into mince or hang him on the gallows. But she didn't care anymore. She shouted that she remembered everything and said goodbye to the teacher. A few hours later, our hero arrived at his home. He was sitting reading his novel when suddenly Hannah landed next to him. Alan raised his head and greeted the student with a serious face. She asked why her brother was so serious. The girl was worried that it was because of her. Maybe she had caused him a lot of trouble. But the thing was different. Alan said that he had just learned something very important. The sweet girl looked at the mentor and asked what he learned. Stern Alan replied that the new issue of Sister Shu was coming out the day after tomorrow. He overheard a conversation between two monks who were complaining about the demon clan. Because of them, they would have to travel all the way to Yun City and stand there all night for a new release. Therefore, Alan must leave for Yun tomorrow, so there will only be one lesson. He hid his book and asked his sister Hannah to attack him with all her might. The girl was surprised, because if she tries so hard, the guy's house won't stand it. Brother Alan smiled. He replied that the girl should not worry because she did not have the strength to do it. This answer provoked the best student, and she prepared to show her power. The fire of rage burned in her eyes. Now she will show everything she is capable of to the new teacher. The girl released maximum energy from her sword and sent it into the air, calling on the heavenly heights. All the blue energy gathered into one huge clot of chakra and rushed towards Alan. It seemed that such power could not be contained, but suddenly there was a bang and the whole clot seemed to burst. Hannah was in shock. All the power that she had summoned dissolved in front of Alan's hand. Then the remnants of her chakra simply flew into the sky and completely dissolved there. Meanwhile, Alan looked pathetically at the girl, demonstrating to her what he was really capable of. Hannah was in a daze, her eyes fluttering in surprise and her mouth open from the shock she felt. Feeling helpless, the girl fell to her knees. She could not believe that she had lost. Alan looked at the lost beauty and said that this world is far from ideal, as is her technique. The hero has just found a flaw in her and destroyed it with the help of spiritual power. The girl needs to continue to work on the shortcomings of her techniques. And when she starts doing this, her skill will no longer have limits. If Hannah manages to cope with this, then the obstacles will cease to exist for her. The disappointed girl bared her teeth because she joined the clan more than 20 years ago. She trained hard every day and even became the best student in the clan. But she didn't even dare to think about something like what Alan told her today. Suddenly, the guy sharply moved his foot on the tile and asked his sister to look at him. Having kicked one of the stones, he easily flew into the air. While flying, Alan struck the center of the stone with his hand many times. The stone fell into the guy's hand, and he told Hannah to look at the marks left by the sword on this stone. This should help her level up. Then he threw a stone into the girl's hands, and she deftly caught it. Right in the center of the stone was written one word: sword. Alan also said that the girl should remember that this is his gift to her, and no one should see it except him. The beauty agreed. She jumped up and thanked her brother for the advice, and now it's time for the girl to get back to training. Alan watched Hannah disappear into the night, surprised that she had been training all night. Still, the best student is too stubborn. The hero was worried about her health. After training, the lazy man returned to bed, and soon morning came. Running his hand through his collection of novels, Alan decided it was time to move out. Suddenly, he felt a familiar energy and turned around to look. In the sky, early in the morning, someone was heading somewhere. It was Master Alan, who, to his surprise, had also left the temple that morning. Meanwhile, the master, who was moving at the speed of light, noticed something strange. He stopped and told the stranger that he had been here for quite some time. He wondered if he was tired of waiting. In front of him stood the lord of the demon clan, who was curious whether the master's power was as great as they said. But it seems he came in vain. At that moment, the face of an unknown villain appeared. It was the head of the demon clan, Dustin, and the master immediately recognized him. Uther, Alan's master, asked how the head of the demons knew that he was here. Dustin replied that perhaps someone told him about it. The master immediately realized that this meant that there was a spy in their clan. He was wondering what the demons were planning. Dustin laughed and replied that their goal was the same as always, and it was time for them to stop putting things off. The head of the demons knew that since the Sword Clan found out about their plan, they began to secretly gather a coalition, and he guessed that everything was already ready. Uther pulled out his sword and said that Dustin is a pretty confident guy. However, his self-confidence will drag him into the grave. After these words, the master summoned hundreds of energy swords that rushed towards the enemy. Dustin's eyes lit up bloody, and he replied that if such a day comes, he will accept it with dignity. But that day is not today. He wanted to see if Uther had gathered enough strength to withstand his attack. Meanwhile, in the city of Yun, everything was quiet and calm. Alan was already rushing to the sale of his favorite novel. He quickly reached the city, and now he needs to look around to understand where the meeting will take place. But suddenly, he felt a strong pressure. The guy felt the beam of sword energy, hidden in his master's jade pendant, activate. The master is at the first level of ascension to truth, and his sword technique cannot be matched by anyone, while he can be in such danger. Has he really encountered such a powerful opponent that is capable of defeating him? Meanwhile, the bloodied Uther was held by Dustin, who told him that this attack was too weak for him. But the head of the demons was surprised that the sword's energy actually helped hold back his attack. The energy hidden in this jade pendant that cracked. Opening his eyes slightly, Uther remembered that this pendant was given to him by his student Alan. In his memoirs, Alan told the master that this pendant was his gratitude for taking care of him. Smiling, the guy said that this was just a small manifestation of concern. Dustin swung a second time and said that it was time to die. He wouldn't miss the second time. Meanwhile, Alan revealed the strange seal on his chest and said that these powers should be enough. He began to concentrate his energy in circles like ripples on water, gradually emerged from his head. The circles became larger and larger. The almighty lazy man was looking for his goal. Dustin felt something strange happening behind him and turned around. Alan summoned his sword technique, a space-cutting beam. At that moment, a huge beam of energy appeared above Dustin's head, similar to a divine column of electricity that was directed directly at him. The blow hit its target, and Dustin, tormented after such a powerful attack, thought that this technique belonged to Master Reynold. He held a piece of Uther's clothing in his hand. His opponent disappeared. Dustin was furious. He swore that their next meeting would be his last. After some time, Alan was already in place. The guy realized that he had hit the target. However, this did not help. The strength of his opponent was probably much higher than the level of the Purple Palace. But why did someone from the demon clan need to kill his master? Fortunately, Master Uther managed to escape and Alan was already rushing back. The hero returned to the city where his book was being sold. The guy thought that upon returning home, he would need to visit the master. The guy looked down and was surprised that this city was quite crowded today. All these people stood in line for the ceremony in honor of the release of the new volume of the Immortals' Mad Journey. Alan didn't think that everything would be like this, but he had no choice. He had to stand and wait. Evening came. The line gradually shortened, and suddenly the seller said that there was the last copy left. The residents were indignant, but Alan rejoiced at his success because now it was his turn. He extended his hand to the coveted reward. Apparently today luck is on his side. But suddenly someone's hand also reached out to the book. Next to Alan stood a gorgeous girl with blue eyes and in a pink robe. She looked at the guy seductively and innocently. But the hero was not so simple. He put his hand on the book and did not want to give it away. Then the girl turned on all her charm and sense of smell, asking this handsome guy to give her the last copy. But Alan did not give in and rudely refused the girl. Then she offered to pay him twice as much for this book. Her gaze became stern, and she said that this was a great deal. You shouldn't refuse a luxurious lady. No one wanted to give in. The hero and the girl shouted to the seller that they needed this book. The sellers did not know what to do. Seeing the angry buyers, they asked them to calm down. There was the last copy left and I needed to come up with something to share it. And then the girl had an idea. She said that since Alan does not want to give in to her, then she should act according to her conscience. The hero asked what the girl meant. Cards with pictures of hands appeared in her hand, and the girl suggested playing rock, paper, scissors. Alan doubted that it was very easy to cheat in this game, to which the girl replied that she personally created it, and these cards are capable of reproducing a person's thoughts, so there is no way to cheat here. They can use this to achieve justice. The guy agreed that it would be really difficult to cheat. Everything seems quite reasonable. In the end, they decided to play. Alana's rival offered to play until 3 victories. The hero agreed to this condition. He decided to choose scissors in the first round to check everything. The girl gave a countdown. After she counted to 3, they put the cards on the table. She invited the vendors to turn over the first round of cards. The sellers turned over the cards, and a disappointed Alan saw that he had lost. The girl rejoiced at the victory, and the guy tried to understand whether she cheated or was just lucky. The second round began. This time the guy was not going to lose. To prevent her from cheating, Alan decided to turn over the cards himself. Turning it over, he saw that he had scissors and the girl had a stone. There was pure disappointment in Alan's eyes. One more loss, and he would lose his treasured book. But the girl won another round. She mocked him by tossing her cards in her hand. Apparently, she was lucky today. Alan could hardly stand on his feet, realizing his failure, and the sellers said that if he felt bad, they could contact someone from his clan to pick him up. He tried to find where the girl cheated, but everything was clean. The guy wasted so much effort, and his book went to another buyer. But nothing can be done about it. The hero decided to return home. His tea leaves are about to ripen. He needs to prepare a new batch for the head of the clan. After walking around the market, Alan still didn't find any new seeds for tea. Now he has nothing to do here. It's time to return home. Flying over the city, Alan suddenly heard the swearing of passers-by, who shouted that the girl had deceived them. They asked the scammer to return their elixir to them. She in turn said that she was just lucky, to which the guys replied that she could not be lucky 20 times in a row. This was the same girl who defeated the hero. She shouted that she was an honest person, but these 2 monks were unlikely. Apparently, heaven was punishing them for all the bad things they had done in their lives. The guys were sure that the girl was a liar, so she decided to run away from the crime scene in time. But the monks were not going to give up, and one of them decided to use his golden energy. Instantly, a golden hand appeared above the girl, and she realized that this energy was at the level of the Purple Palace. Suddenly, she saw Alan and started waving at him, getting his attention. The girl asked the guy to help her, and 2 monks asked the hero who he was. Alan was outraged that the beauty was asking for help, complaining that these 2 monks wanted to beat her, because just recently she had taken his book. The monks were wary, but the hero folded his hands in a sign of peace and said that he didn't really know this girl, so he wouldn't interfere in their showdown. The girl shouted that Alan was heartless. She asked if he had forgotten their first meeting. Just like the hero remembered her, they played a strange game and he lost. The monks realized that apparently not only were they deceived by this girl, they would still have to teach her a lesson. Alan, meanwhile, only thought that if he did not interfere in the affairs of this couple, then he could regain his romance. But the girl was not happy with this situation. She took up the book and shouted that if the guy didn't help her right away, she would tear it into small pieces. The monks asked why she went crazy. After something like this, she wouldn't get away with it. The guy called on his chakra and instantly it formed in the form of a golden hand. But suddenly his chakra was dissolved by a column of blue energy. Alan stood up to protect the girl. A blue aura shone around him, protecting him. The monk experienced a strange effect. It seemed that his powers were blocked. But the stranger said that he would not help the girl. Why did he stand up for her now? Alan apologized to them. He said that his plans had changed and asked him to understand. The indignant hero then turned to the swindler and asked her to give him the book. But the girl was not going to do this. She thanked the naive guy and used one of her abilities. At that same second, the girl disappeared into the air, leaving behind only a blue silhouette of energy. But Alan was not going to just let her go. He caught the rest of her chakra. The guy smiled menacingly. She wouldn't be able to get away from him so easily. Having caught the remains of chakra, Alan jumped after the criminal. The monks who watched this felt the guy's creepy energy. They wanted to know what clan he was from. Suddenly, the second monk remembered that their treasures were still with that lady, and they needed to return them. Meanwhile, a cunning girl appeared outside the city. She was glad that it was not in vain that she had been training for so long. But suddenly, she felt a strong pressure on herself, and someone was next to her. The terrible Alan appeared right in front of the girl and asked how she dared to lie to him. He sent 2 of his energy blasts into the girl's chest. Suddenly, she felt that she could no longer levitate. Alan blocked all her powers. The hero managed to catch her. Looking at the criminal, he menacingly asked what clan she was from. Alan said that the girl's lies would not just get away with her. According to the law of forces, her spiritual power should be sealed, and she should be demoted to a simple person who would have to clean pigsties for a whole week. The girl imagined how she would be poking around in the mud with pigs, and this terrible punishment frightened the exhausted beauty. She kicked her legs and tried to escape. At that moment, 2 monks flew past the couple, whom the girl had robbed. The beauty asked to let her go, but Alan said that he would not let her out until she gave the book back. Then the girl said that he would be alone for the rest of his life if he continued to read such novels. But she had no choice. The swindler took a book out of her pocket and handed it to Alan in exchange for her powers. Alan did just that. He restored the girl's strength and threw her a spirit stone. But he was really curious about how she managed to cheat so cleverly. The girl was indignant. She said that she did not cheat and did not deceive anyone. She just took advantage of a small illusion. The monks who heard this were indignant because this was cheating. Alan asked what illusion the girl used. She took the card, and at one moment there was a stone on it. Then the girl turned it over, and instead of the stone there were scissors. The monk said that such an illusion does not reveal even half of the real strength. Quite cleverly, it is not surprising that they lost. With the help of this illusion, they can adjust round after round for their own benefit. Alan remembered that when they competed, he took the initiative to turn over the girl's cards, which is how she managed to win, because she can't change his cards during the game. The girl replied that this is a simple cognitive modification. While he thinks that he has lost, the picture in front of his eyes will change as she needs. Cognitive modification is an advanced method of illusions that includes the laws of cause and effect, which is what makes the method work. The stunned monk asked the girl who she was. The beauty struck a pose and introduced herself. Her name is Lisa, and she is from the Palace of Heavenly Illusions. One of the monks asked a comrade what power this heavenly palace has. He replied that this is a famous ancient clan that is voluntarily isolated from others. They do not enter into an alliance, but their strength should not be underestimated. The monks bowed their heads and asked Lisa's forgiveness for not recognizing her. To the girl's surprise, they allowed her to keep the thing that she had taken from them. In addition, the monk asked her to go with them in search of treasures, because her illusions would be very useful if they encountered danger. Hearing the words about treasures, the girl immediately became inspired. She loved everything valuable and shiny. The monk explained that a few days ago, in the depths of the Yun mountain range, a red ray of light appeared, filling the air with energy. It was likely that some rare treasure could be found there. Alan, hearing these words, became interested, because it could be that same demon. The monk continued the story by saying that this ridge is winding and long, but he knows the approximate path, so they can go there together. If there is a lot of treasure, they will divide it among themselves, and if there is only one, they will use it in turn. Alan wondered, the red beam a few days ago, if this was the very thing he was thinking about. However, the guy decided that it was useless to think because it could be a simple coincidence. Sister Lisa happily agreed to go with the monks in search of treasures. The monk also invited Brother Alan to go with them because he is a strong fighter, and there may be a rare and powerful treasure hidden there that will interest him. But Alan, waving negatively, said that he was not interested in this, and he did not want to waste his vacation on this. He wanted to take this time to have a good rest and read a new volume of the story. After these words, the guy left. Lisa was angry, saying that he ruined everything, but she was sure that the hero would return to them. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forest, a bloody aura was gathering around a familiar halberd. Traveling Howard was delighted with the discovery. He had finally found it. Finally, he found the very devil fruit that his master had spoken about. Lisa, along with her new comrades, went in search of adventure. The first test on the way for them was a ferocious creature similar to a lion. The creature, filled with power, jumped towards the brave girl. Swinging his paw, he hit Lisa, but her upper part immediately evaporated. The beast was confused. The girl used her illusion and jumped into the air. The bait worked. Meanwhile, one of the monks at that moment began to use golden mist. The enraged beast turned around, sensing danger. But it was too late. The monk struck his opponent using one of his abilities. It was called 9 Misty Whirlwinds. The exhausted creature fell dead to the ground. The monk praised Lisa, saying that her power of illusions was simply incredible. Thanks to her, they were able to easily defeat such a formidable opponent. Another comrade also praised the girl, saying that even if they meet a beast of the highest level, they will be able to deal with it in no time. Lisa was a little embarrassed, but she liked the praise in her direction. But it was necessary to move forward. Our heroes went deep into the dense thicket. Lisa was already tired of walking. She said that half an hour had already passed since they left the mountain range. Are the guys sure that the treasure even exists? The monk calmed the girl down, telling her not to worry, because if he was not mistaken, then the goal was not so far away. Meanwhile, Howard began his ritual by ordering the demonic spear to absorb the energy. If everything goes according to the demon's plan, then within a few hours he will be able to get it out. The villain was looking forward to this moment. As soon as he gets the fruit, the master will be pleased. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a magical aura that he felt. Howard turned around. He realized that someone was approaching him right now. Using his magical vision, the demon elder saw 2 Youngshan clan disciples and a girl walking in his direction. This wasn't his plan. If they found the devil fruit and notified their clan, there would be trouble. The level of these 3 was not very high, so Howard was confident that he could deal with them with the help of bloody puppets. He took out from his pocket one of the 3 artifacts similar to a bell that the Lord had given him and rang it. At that same second, the ringing from the bell began to form a demonic gate. Howard laughed. It would be better if these travelers ran away from him. An unknown substance appeared, and Howard told her that he would stay here to protect the fetus, and the unknown creature that appeared should lead these 3 uninvited guests to him. The creature, engulfed in a purple aura, understood the order and instantly rushed after its target. Observing the artifact, Howard said that he was not in a situation to leave 3 corpses behind. Meanwhile, Alan returned to Yun City because it was already too late, and he doesn't work overtime. The guy was sitting in one of the taverns and drinking aromatic tea while reading a long-awaited book. Before he knew it, he had almost read to the end of the book. Finally, the killer whose identity had been hidden all this time was about to be revealed. Alan eagerly turned the page. Here it is. The secret the guy wanted to know about, his eyes sparkled. But there was only a drawing of the face of a girl he knew, and an inscription that said that she would not tell him who the killer was. Alan's disappointment knew no bounds. Lisa ruined such a moment by replacing the last page. He started screaming at the top of his lungs. The guy couldn't believe that the book would end at such a moment. From his screams, the earth began to tremble. The people in the tavern thought it was an earthquake. Suddenly, in the sky, they saw a blue beam that rushed past them like a star. Enraged, Alan raced towards his goal. He vowed to find her even if he had to destroy the entire mountain range. Meanwhile, the team of adventurers went further into the forest and began to notice a strange situation around them. In addition, for some reason it seemed to Lisa that someone was watching her right now. The monk who led the detachment turned sharply and shouted that something was wrong here. Something was moving towards them. At that moment, purple lightning struck the guy and blood poured out of his mouth. Lisa and the second monk screamed when they saw this terrible sight. The monk fell to the ground. His brother grabbed his partner and began to try to bring him to consciousness. Lisa noticed something approaching the still living guy and tried to warn him, but he did not have time to react in time. Now 2 monks were lying on the ground unconscious. Lisa trembled, asking who was there. Stuttering, the girl asked the creature to appear. At that same second, a person as fast as dark lightning appeared behind her. Lisa felt a powerful blow to her neck and immediately lost consciousness. Alan felt something strange. An explosion of spiritual power had just appeared next to him. But suddenly he disappeared somewhere deep in the forest as quickly as he appeared. The guy walked forward surprisingly, but there were no signs of a battle, as if everything had disappeared or someone knew how to cover their tracks. The hero used his sensory ability, and at that moment he felt that there was something in the air. The dark entity was already about to attack the guy, approaching him from behind. But Alan, who was standing motionless, suddenly opened his eyes and stopped the attacker. The dark blade, almost touching the hero's neck, stopped. Alan asked the creature who he was and what he was trying to do. The violet aura dissipated, and inside it, Alan saw a cute little girl holding a needle with trembling hands. Feeling a terrible aura in front of her, the girl suddenly began to cry. Alan assumed that she could not speak and asked about it. The cute creature nodded her head. The hero asked if the three guys who fought with her were still alive or not, and the girl nodded her head in the affirmative again. Suddenly, the guy became stern and told the creature to take him to them, and then he would not punish her. The creature wanted to agree when suddenly they heard the ringing of a bell coming from the depths of the forest. The little girl grabbed her head, feeling a dark pressure on herself. Sobbing, the girl flew towards the bell, which greatly surprised Alan. The hero immediately realized that this was a soul control bell. The master told him that this was a kind of witchcraft that seals the soul of a living person in a bell, placing a curse on him. Apparently, there was a clan of demons here too. Meanwhile, the demonic spear was gathering energy around itself. Howard, who was ringing the bell, looked at the three prisoners from whom the power was being siphoned off and told the arriving girl that she had so much time, but she still could not grab another person. The demon called the little girl useless trash and placed his foot on her tiny body. The girl lay sobbing on the ground, and the elder of the demons said that there was no way she could escape from him. If she tries to escape, Howard will do everything to turn her life into such a nightmare that she herself will beg him for death. Suddenly, an unknown voice from a cloud of aura asked where that guy was now, because he came here for him. And besides, why did Howard call him if he said that he could handle it himself? But they didn't have to look for the guy for long. He was already right above their heads and said that it certainly wouldn't have been possible to restore such damage in just a couple of days without outside help. The elder demon immediately recognized the scoundrel who defeated him last time. Because of this, he had to humiliate himself in front of his master and take a long time to heal his wounds. Howard did not wait long and immediately attacked his sworn enemy, sending a demonic clot of energy similar to a skeleton skull in his direction. But Alan, as always, easily repelled the elder's attack by simply dispersing the villainous energy. He smiled, mocking his opponent, and said that he didn't understand how Howard was still holding on with such strength. The demon's rage began to boil more and more. Alan irritated him with his equanimity. He grabbed the bell and ordered Gwyneth to quickly kill the vile insect. But Alan, with a quick movement of his blade, cut off the demon's hand, which was holding the bell. The hero approached the little girl. Now he knew her name. Her name was Gwyneth. The guy attacked the ancient artifact with his energy, and it immediately split into small pieces. He told the sobbing little girl that she no longer needed to be the demon's puppet. Now the girl is free and can do what she wants. From these words, her eyes filled with even more tears. The girl flew sharply towards Alan, but Howard ordered her to stop. Gwyneth immediately fell to the ground. The demon said that even without the bell, she could not disobey his orders. The villain tried to say what would happen to her if she disobeyed, but at that moment he shut up because he got hit on the head by a little girl. After the blow, the frightened Gwyneth immediately rushed into Alan's arms. The guy stroked the crying girl on the head and told her that now she can return home. And she doesn't have to worry, the hero here will sort everything out himself. This is coercion and exploitation of labor. He himself understood all this perfectly well, because he had once been in exactly the same situation. Howard was not going to give up. He stood up and hit the ground with his fist, calling on the bloody hell technique. At that same second, a bloody aura began to escape from his hands, within which many eyes appeared. A huge hand appeared from the bloody hell, and a voice was heard from inside that asked who dared to challenge his master. A huge demon appeared from a dark portal, which Howard ordered to immediately kill this monk. The monster understood the order, swung at the hero. He shouted that this guy was just a small pawn, and his master should not dirty his hands with such garbage. Sharp blades of bloody energy rushed towards Alan to kill him, but he took his sword out of its sheath. At that moment, a huge pillar of the guy's aura hit the sky and blocked the path of the demon's attack. The creature was surprised by the guy's strength, but it's a pity that because of his seal, the demon can only show 1/5 of his strength. The monster shouted that one day he would return, and there would be a glorious battle between them, but for now the guy could only remember his name. The monster wanted to say his name, but without speaking, he burst due to Alan's multiple cuts. Gwyneth hid behind the guy and was shocked by what she saw, and Alan only sighed in disappointment. Howard was horrified how a mere mortal could defeat such a powerful demon. However, that was not all. Alan was not going to just let the impudent elder go this time. The guy concentrated his powerful power in his fingers, creating a blade of energy. Howard realized that now his end would come and began to beg the guy to stop and wait a little. But before he could finish speaking, a powerful stream of mana created by Alan passed through him. Then there was an explosion, and the guy who turned around said that he didn't need to wait. Suddenly, Alan saw his still shackled comrades. among whom was the girl who had stolen his treasured page. He sent a small part of his chakra into the girl to wake her up. At that same second, Lisa opened her eyes and gradually began to come to her senses. She immediately recognized the guy and panicked, but Alan hastened to calm her down, saying that she had spent too much spiritual power and she needed to rest. Then he would help her get to the city. But suddenly a scarlet light shone behind Alan, which did not bode well. The battle was not over yet, because the bloody halberd began to rise and whirlwinds swirled around it. Suddenly, among the collected energy, Lloyd appeared, who told Alan that he was one step away from killing the master. The hero actually forced him to sacrifice his last magical weapon, and now the only thing Lloyd so fiercely wants is Alan's death. The lazy man exhaled in disappointment. Again, he had to fight another battle with a madman. He turned around and pointed his hand at the demon, saying that he did not understand what was happening to him. But if one sword was not enough for him, then he would use another one. After these words, Alan released a powerful stream of energy, which, like a destructive wave, rushed towards the enemy. But this time Lloyd was able to repel the hero's attack, shouting that he was now much more powerful than his opponent. The villain counterattacked by sending his bloody aura in the form of a demonic mask at the hero. The guy realized that it was too dangerous to leave his allies here and threw them away with the help of his strength. He then tried to block the enemy's attack with his weapon, which he usually easily succeeded in doing. But this time something went wrong and Alan even moved back a little from such force. The hero couldn't believe that just now the monster was at the 7th level of the Purple Palace, but now he was already at the 2nd level of ascending to the truth. The guy looked closer and saw a strange scarlet stone in Lloyd's forehead. Now everything became clear. This thing on his forehead was an ancient forgotten treasure, the amber of the harvest. Lloyd smiled. He did not expect anything less from a student of the swordsman clan. The guy was able to recognize the artifact. According to ancient legends, tens of millions of years ago, someone picked up this stone and, by activating it, greatly increased his spiritual level and became a powerful ruler. But just 5 years later, all his vitality was exhausted, and he died, cursing the treasure. Since then, anyone in whose hands the amber of the harvest ended up could not count on a different fate. Alan said that although he does not know how Lloyd ended up with this ancient treasure, everything in this world must obey one law of force. Therefore, this power, like any other, must have its price. The guy threw a mirror at the feet of the demon. He invited the elder to look at himself in the mirror and understand who he had become and stop harboring false illusions. Lloyd looked in the mirror and saw a decrepit old man there. The demon could not believe his eyes because he was given at least 800 years. In a rage, the master broke the mirror and asked why he looked like that. Alan explained that this treasure is a demon that sucks all the vitality out of him. Lloyd was distraught. He laughed and said that if he returned what he owed, then his master would definitely give him an elixir that would restore his vitality. If this stone was used wisely, then the whole world would fall at his feet. Alan guessed that the villain was crazy and prepared his sword. Apparently, the stone had completely brainwashed him. The enraged demon shouted at the hero to close his mouth, and at that moment bit his finger until it bled. He then applied his blood to the stone, completing his ritual. The demon's power increased, and scarlet flames flew around him. He became stronger and stronger. Gathering all his new power, he fired a bloody tornado at the mighty hero. Alan used his sword to stop the furious attack. But suddenly it didn't work. The demon's power was colossal, and now Alan couldn't block his blows. It was now obvious that Lloyd had not reached the 2nd level of ascension to truth, but the 5th level, and became equal to the head of the Sword Clan, Reynold. The wounded Alan fell to his knee. He was trying to catch his breath after such an attack. But he had his trump card. The guy lowered his robe and a secret seal appeared on his chest. Lloyd wanted to attack the guy, but suddenly a golden whirlwind enveloped the villain, which he had to dodge. It was Gwyneth who came to Alan's aid and tried to somehow detain the villain. The furious demon attacked the little spirit, shouting that it was in vain that she rebelled against him. But our hero managed to stop the bloody ray in time, telling Gwyneth that he told her to leave. Why did she come back? Lloyd didn't stop. Taking advantage of the pause, he tried to attack the guy with his spear. Alan looked at his seal and thought it was too late. The spear hit its target, but suddenly Alan simply disappeared into the air like smoke. The old man couldn't believe his eyes how he just disappeared into thin air. But the answer appeared on its own. The villain looked up and saw Lisa there, who was using one of her abilities on Alan. The enraged demon used his infernal fangs pointing them at the girl. The second time her illusion would not work. Suddenly, a powerful stream of power hit the sky, dispersing all the bloody energy in the area. Rescued, Lisa looked at the powerful column of energy and could not believe her eyes. In the center of the stream was the transformed Alan. Now the real battle will begin. The hero awakened his power, his eyes turned blue, and the seal released some of his energy. In this guise, Alan looked like a demigod, and not like an ordinary lazy loser. But this did not stop Lloyd. He decided that the guy chose death instead of just running away. With the speed of a cheetah, he attacked Alan, but he blocked the halberd's attack with one movement of his hand. Lloyd couldn't believe his eyes. It was impossible for an ordinary mortal to resist such power. Besides Lloyd, there was Lisa, who didn't believe what was happening. Was Alan really that strong? The demigod said that in order to cope with the demon, even a drop of his spiritual power would be enough. The demon elder began to tremble, but still did not give up. It was not fear, it was trembling with rage. Lloyd shouted that the hero did not dare insult him and gathered his bloody energy. But Alan didn't care, because the great lazy man was sure that the demon lost when he removed the seal. He took out his sword and instantly a huge golden dragon consisting of divine energy formed behind the hero. The monster growled as it advanced towards Lloyd. The powerful pressure felt even at a great distance from such a powerful force. The monster was colossal in size, and Lloyd's energy was no match for it. It couldn't be stopped. Instantly, divine energy passed through the demon elder, dispelling all his bloody energy. The blow was so powerful that Lloyd disappeared into the air like ashes from paper thrown onto a fire. The divine power rushed back into Alan's seal, and when it returned completely, he calmly buttoned up his robe. All that was left of Lloyd was the harvest amber and the bloody spear. Lisa was surprised that Alan had returned to his previous level. But then her gaze fell on the ancient treasure that was floating in the air. The girl's gaze turned purple. The stone seemed very beautiful to her. The amber of the harvest beckoned the girl. She came closer and closer, and when she was too close, she extended her hand to it. Suddenly, Alan appeared behind her and whispered to her that she shouldn't do this. He summoned a bag into which he invested part of his power and began to seal the demonic artifact. Lisa only now realized that the stone had bewitched her. She felt uneasy about it. Alan explained that this thing is extremely dangerous. You need to be careful with it. Otherwise, you can lose your life like Lloyd. The cute little spirit of Gwyneth immediately appeared and was protected by the hero. Lisa recognized the offender. She pointed at Gwyneth and shouted that it was she who attacked them. Because of this, the little girl began to sob guiltily. Alan, holding Lisa back, said that this girl's name was Gwyneth, and she did not want to offend them. She simply obeyed the soul bell. Lisa asked the guy what happened to the bell now, to which he replied that he destroyed it. Therefore, now Gwyneth is safe and can leave calmly. He asked the girl to be careful and not get caught by the bad guys anymore. Looking at the spirit and the guy saying goodbye, Lisa said that the girl was quite strong and Alan could keep her. To which the guy replied that he was not like these demons. Lisa turned away saying that the bad guy used her as a weapon thanks to the soul bell. The beauty thought about it and decided that she was mistaken about the hero. Alan replied that since she was mistaken, could Lisa return him the page that she tore out? And the girl was indignant that this fool only cared about a stupid novel. But there is no need to argue with him, so Lisa gave him the last page. The hero was barely embarrassed when he saw that very last page. But deciding that he would leave it for later, he hid it in his robe, thanking the girl and saying that no one should know about what she saw. Lisa did not understand why the guy would do this, because killing the elder of the demon clan is a great achievement, and he can become famous, for which Alan poked her in the forehead and told the girl not to ask unnecessary questions, but simply accept it as a fact. The beauty understood. The last question remained, what to do with this spear, and Alan had the answer. He would simply take it with him and dispose of it. And he also asked Lisa to take care of those guys while he went first with this thing, to which the girl got angry, saying that she was not a nanny. The guy extended his hand to the spear to take it away, when suddenly a huge hand of unknown strength appeared from space. A voice from space shouted that he would not allow the bloody halberd to be taken away and grabbed the artifact, dragging it along with him. A second later, the monster disappeared. This was quite unusual. Lisa shuddered from such a strong aura. She asked what it was. Alan replied that it was probably another elder. The girl asked if the guy was going to follow him because the weapon was probably valuable, to which the guy replied that firstly, the unknown person was too strong, and it would not be easy to deal with him. And secondly, he did not care about the disposal of this artifact in an amicable way. Well, thirdly, Alan is now on a legal vacation, so it's time for him to leave because he needs to quickly return and find out how the novel ended, the hero hoped. The hero said goodbye and hoped that he would meet Lisa again. After these words, the guy quickly ran away, leaving the girl confused. She stuck her tongue out at him in parting, saying that she didn't need him to meet him again, because so many bad things had happened since their first meeting with the beauty. But if you think about it, Alan has incredible strength, good character, and he's not bad looking. Lisa thought that she shouldn't think about this because this guy left to deal with the consequences of what happened. But in their next meeting, by morning, Lisa woke up the monks, the girl slapped each guy in the face, and they immediately woke up. The monks did not understand what had happened. The head of the demons disappeared somewhere, and Lisa sat in front of them without a single scratch. The girl saw the questioning faces of the guys and decided to tell them everything. After a few minutes of stories, one of the monks was horrified to learn that the treasure was a weapon of a clan of demons. It turns out that Lisa and Alan saved them from death. Lisa confirmed the guy's words, adding that they were lucky because the elder died from exhaustion of spiritual energy. The monk asked where Mr. Allen was. He was worried because they didn't even thank him for saving him. Brother, isn't the solemn meeting about to begin? Considering his strength, Mr. Allen would surely be there as a representative of his clan. Indeed, there we can thank him, the monk answered, which surprised Lisa. The girl became interested in what kind of meeting would be held, when and where it would be. The monk scratched his head and said that it was not surprising that the girl knew nothing about the meeting because their city was isolated from the rest of the world. Most of the clans from the east are part of the alliance, and every 10 years they send a representative to Tianjiao. During this meeting, the rating of each clan is determined. This is called the Great Meeting in Tianjiao. In addition, the place in the ranking in the future affects the distribution of resources between clans. Lisa understood everything. She assumed that she could also come there. The monk answered the girl that given the reputation of her clan, it was quite possible. The cunning girl smiled and thought that if she went there, she would have the opportunity to fight with that guy. Her gaze was insidious, and the girl decided that it was time for her to return. Meanwhile, Alan was already hurrying home. Flying over the mountains, he thought about past battles. That man, what happened to him? Casting such a spell requires extreme skill and great spiritual strength. His power is very great. If I don't destroy the seal by at least a third, I'm definitely not his opponent. But most likely this will need to be done because the demon clan has taken up the matter and dared to attack even the master. They probably need that demonic halberd for a reason. Even if I try to return the weapons, it will certainly lead to a lot of attacks and a big crisis. I count on the help of the elders of my clan, and I myself can contribute to solving this problem. Suddenly, the guy felt a strange aura in the wind. He stopped and asked the entity why she had come. At that same second, a golden whirlwind formed behind him. To the guy's surprise, Gwyneth appeared from a golden whirlwind and crashed into the hero's chest. Looking at the child's tear-stained eyes, Alan realized that she simply had nowhere to go, and she wanted to go with him. The hero said that she could join him, but if in the future she wants to leave, she doesn't have to ask for permission. Hearing these words, the little girl's spirit burst into tears and pressed closer to the guy as a sign of gratitude. Alan stroked her head to calm her down. The hero did not expect that he could get a magical companion for nothing. Having gone home, the guy said that it was great that from the outside Gwyneth's power looked like the wind. This was an excellent conspiracy. In the future, Alan promised to solve her speech problems. The spirit was slightly surprised by what was said, after which the guy decided that it was time to return to the clan. Flying up to the familiar mountains, the hero told Gwyneth that now this place would become her home. Meanwhile, in one of the palaces of the swordsman clan, Reynold landed next to the girl. In a panic, the head of the swordsman clan began to ask what happened to the master. A girl named Selena said that he had many fractures. Internal organs were damaged. If they had delayed a little, then not a single god could have saved him. Master Uther slept in his bed. Selene used the divine pill. His life was saved. Reynold's rage knew no bounds. He vowed to make them answer for what they did to the master. A little later, in a secret place of the Alliance, on the border of the Dark Moon, a meeting was held. The elder of the Purple Spirit clan, Ivar, the 4th level of Ascension to Truth, asked why Reynold called them all. Reynold began his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, it's no secret that the Demon Clan has become very active in the last few days. As soon as I crossed the borders of the prefecture, it immediately attacked me. In addition, Dustin, the elder of the Demon Clan, has been busy improving the Bloody Demon Warrior formation. I think each of us understands what this means. Even though the students of my clan were unable to return the Devil Fruit, they returned the Bloody Soul Pearl. I instructed one of the masters to personally deliver it to the Alliance, but he was attacked by a man from the Demon Clan. The master himself was seriously injured, and his spirit was also damaged. Ivar was horrified. Were Master Uther's injuries really that severe? Few people can match his level. How could he receive such damage? Master Reynold is right. The question is indeed serious, said the elder of the Taishu clan, named Henry, the 9th level of Ascension to Truth. The elder suggested that the demons have their own informant within the Alliance. From today, I recommend that all elders conduct a thorough check among their students. It is necessary to prevent the impending disaster. to get rid of the problem at the root. If the demon clan finds out about our intentions, I am sure that they will not sit idly by. Reynold was surprised that Master Henry agreed with his assumption. The man immediately stood up and shouted that he, as one of the elders, would willingly obey the master's order and personally carry out the inspection. The elder of the Yongxian clan, Cody, the fourth level of ascension to truth, added that just a few hours ago, news came from the disciples of his clan. They met the elder of the demon clan on the mountain ridge. He attacked them, depriving them of spiritual strength. Their lives hung by a thread. But the elder was weakened due to the fact that the ancient treasure sucked all the life force out of him. As a result, a student of another clan and a guy named Alan joined forces to kill him. Hearing the name of his weak and lazy student, Reynold was very surprised. The elder did not understand what the guy was doing there. He must be on vacation. How did he end up there? Seeing Reynold's reaction, Henry asked him if he knew the name. Reynold explained that in his clan, there is a disciple with that name, but his level cannot be that high. He must have just been helping. I'll ask him when I return. Suddenly, a vague cosmic figure spoke. The man said that due to the increased activity of the demon clan lately, they were forced to take action as soon as possible. It was the elder. Ivar thought, since the creation of the alliance, the rules have been revised only 3 times. Changing the charter now, is this appropriate? Energy began to form in Silas's hand, and he said that those gathered here could be sure of this. After all, he will not skimp on motivating the students. When they saw what he created, the elders were surprised. Silas offered to use this as a reward. In his hand was a golden thing that looked like a mysterious key. After some time, Alan returned to the clan residence and decided to visit his master. He held a box and a small jug in his hand. The guy looked friendly and asked the master how he was feeling. Uther greeted the student. Thanks to Selena's care, he felt much better. He just needed a little time to recover. Alan, meanwhile, opened his box and replied that he was calm now. In the box, there were 2 lumps of greens and a spoon. The hero took the greens and, using a spoon, carefully poured them into the glass, telling the master that he carefully grew these tea leaves. Then the guy added water from a small jug. This water was straight from the mine. Having brewed the tea, Alan handed it to the master, saying that a cup of this tea would definitely restore the spiritual strength of the teacher. Alan came closer to the bed and asked Uther to drink it. He happily accepted the gift. After taking 1 sip, the man felt a surge of strength after appreciating his student's tea. He then said that Alan should use the time he spends on plants on his own development because his level is still too low. Among the students, Alan is perhaps at the lowest level. The teacher's words upset Alan. Again, he took up his task. The hero decided to release some spiritual power this time. A blue aura surrounded Alan, and the guy told Uther that he had risen to level 8 recently. Seeing the force flying around the room, the master was surprised. But then his gaze changed from joyful to indifferent. The angry teacher said that 5 years have passed since Alan's last breakthrough. Look at your sister. She trained hard to achieve her goal. Alan, in his usual manner, said that he would try his best. The teacher asked him to stop making fun of him. As your teacher, I know that you don't like to hear about such trivial things. You probably visited me for a reason, realizing that the conversation was getting serious. Alan hurried to get out of here as quickly as possible, but the master stopped the guy. The teacher said that he was wounded by one of the people of the demon clan, and he almost died in that battle. But the jade pendant that Alan gave him protected him from a deadly attack. Then there was a sudden flash of light that injured the attacker and allowed Uther to escape. Alan, tell me the truth. Are you hiding something from me? For example, your true level. Or maybe you sealed away your true power so you don't show it to us. Master, are you serious now? How could I hide my level from you in the head? That's also true. You're not very diligent. I don't think you could pull off something like that. But what about the jade pendant? Where did you get it? Uther asked, and Alan told him that he found it in a treasure chest. I felt that it exuded an unusual aura, so I decided to give such a precious thing to the teacher. Uther smiled. You accidentally picked up a real treasure. This jade pendant probably contains the energy of a sword of incredible power. If it weren't for you, I would no longer be alive. Such words even made Alan slightly embarrassed. It wasn't often that he heard the master's praise. Suddenly, Uther called the guy, and he turned to the teacher. At the same second, the master pointed his palm at the guy, trying to attack him. But right in front of the hero's face, he stopped his hand. Frightened, Alan asked the teacher what he was doing. In fact, Alan guessed that the teacher was testing him, and did not shy away. Uther laughed, saying that Alan's reaction was not sharp enough for an 8th level. Alan confirmed the master's words, saying that he was still far from mastering the teacher. At that moment, a book appeared from his robe. A gust of wind shook her in her hero's robe, and the book fell straight onto the bed. The master noticed the book and seemed to recognize it. Alan blushed and panicked. The teacher must not find out what is inside this book. Uther tried to take the book, but Alan quickly snatched it away and said that it was just a little hobby. Suddenly, the master waved his hand. Driving the guy away, he allowed him to go. Finally, he advised the hero to practice more and read less nonsense. This behavior surprised Alan. The teacher should have reprimanded him for this, but he didn't even pay attention. The master interrupted Alan's thoughts by asking when he would leave. The hero replied that he was leaving right now. As soon as the guy left their room, the master lifted the pillow, under which lay that same book. After picking up the novel, Uther said that he didn't think Alan would like something he had written. Considering that this is a limited edition book, and also with an autograph, we can conclude that this is exactly what he spent his vacation on. Having hidden the book, the master decided that it was better for Alan not to know who its writer was. The next day, Reynold gathered the chief elders of his clan. Standing in front of the 4 men, he announced that the rules of the alliance would be changed. The head of the Fengling Hall named Mark told the head that they had already discussed this at the last meeting. Would they really do this? Yes, we need to test our students. The following changes were adopted by a margin of 7-3 votes. The first change is that a non-aggression rule has been introduced. Safety is guaranteed for each member of the alliance. The second change is the need for a written agreement to participate in the battle. And the last thing is the ban on revenge for those killed in battle by his clan brothers and sisters. The Blue Moon Hall master named Frank said that all the students who take part in the competition are true geniuses. Their death will be a great loss. Reynold himself understood this. The master's worries were not unfounded, but the attacks of the demon clan had become more frequent. To cope with a possible crisis in the future, the younger generation must quickly learn from their experience. The head of the Langston Hall named Kevin said that in fact, if anyone from the demon clan decided to threaten the lives of the students, they would have to engage in direct confrontation. It is true, however, that it is better to face a crisis with a sober mind and decisive action. Everything else should not bother your minds, said the last master of the Liu Yun Hall, named Uther. Reynold said that Master Uther is right, moreover, this time we plan to take first place. After all, the reward for first place will be the key to the Emperor's tomb. When the masters heard about the award, they were surprised. This was one of the most valuable relics. The Emperor was the first person who ascended to the truth 5 million years ago, and many treasures remained after him. His tomb was discovered in the sea area. It took 5 key fragments to open it. Reynolds said that 4 of them have been discovered so far, but he could not imagine who would have the last fragment in their hands, and if they could get it, they would be able to open the Emperor's tomb. That is why our clan must win. We must take first place. Reynolds announced that the selection of applicants will begin in a week. After some time, the guys were discussing the announcement on the street. This time, the competition would be different from previous ones. You can use not only talismans, but also some forbidden knowledge. Some students considered this too dangerous. It doesn't matter, said one of the students, because all the heads and elders will gather there. I heard that the top 5 will receive worthy rewards, and they will represent our clan at the great meeting. Then what are we waiting for? We need to stock up quickly. If we are late, there will be nothing left for us. The guys went to the store, and our lazy guy, who was sleeping under a tree, noticed that they were too nervous. Fortunately, he had prepared for a long time. Suddenly, he heard a shrill voice come from behind him. It was Steve greeting his brother. Alan asked the guy what he wanted, and why Steve was here and not in the shop with the other students. Why do I need something when I have the technique that you taught me, brother? Steve answered proudly. Alan laughed and said that you can't be so careless. It often leads to defeat. But Steve believed that he could take first place. According to the rules, the top 3 could challenge special students, and if they won, replace one of them. Therefore, ordinary students line up to challenge Alan, defeat the weak lazy person and take his place. The sly man wondered if it would not be more correct to allow himself to be defeated and transfer back to ordinary students, and then my responsibilities would become even less. Steve looked at his idol and admired him. There was not a drop of panic on his face. Everyone who underestimates him will pay for it. Suddenly, Uther's pendant lit up on Alan's belt, which meant that the master was looking for him. Alan told Steve to train hard while he visited the master. A few minutes later, the hero was already at his residence. Standing in front of the master, the hero asked why he was looking for him. Uther greeted the student and said that he had one requirement in view of the upcoming competition. The master said that the guy should not restrain his strength. He should at least get into the top 20 students of the clan. Alan shouted that this was absolutely impossible. In his head, he had already developed a plan for how he would become an ordinary student thanks to this opportunity. There are 55 true students in our clan, the master said. I'm sure it won't be difficult for you to enter the top 20. But Alan did not agree with this. because if he were really strong, then his level would not be so low. Uther looked sternly at the guy and asked if he remembered why the master took him as an apprentice. I, as your teacher, still haven't forgotten the sword technique that you used in the ring back then. Your strength is in no way inferior to that of a true student. You are capable of developing into a true master. Alan cursed that day. I had to restrain myself then. I didn't think that 10% of the force would cause such a wave of destruction. Master, then it was a simple accident, the guy said. Now, even if necessary, I won't be able to repeat it. Do you want to refuse your favorite teacher? Master, but I really can't, Alan replied. No one can stop him from becoming an ordinary student again. Suddenly, the teacher took out a pink book and put it on the table, asking if the guy really couldn't show his strength. Seeing the familiar book in the hands of the master, Alan was a little embarrassed. Uther sent the book into the hands of the guy. The hero was surprised if the master really reads such things too. In Alan's hands, the pages began to turn, and he saw a signature on the last page, the author Uther. At that second, the hero realized that the author of his favorite book was his master. Meanwhile, Uther took out a stack of sheets from his robe and said that this is the 12th volume, which is not yet on sale. But Alan still could not get over the shock. His favorite author had been next to him all this time and also turned out to be his master. But suddenly it dawned on the guy. He realized that if he wanted to get the new volume, he would need to do something for the master. Uther grinned and took the book from Alan's hands. Then the master said that the guy must enter the top 20, otherwise he will kill the main character in the next part. Alan couldn't believe his ears. She was his favorite character. Master, how can you decide the fate of a character so hastily? Don't you feel sorry for the fans? But Uther was unshakable. He said that the elder sister of the protagonist would marry another man. This information shocked Alan even more. The elder sister is his second favorite character. The master is too cruel. Alan decided to use a trick and asked his master if he was afraid that his student would tell the elder about who the author of the novel was. Uther replied that if this happened, he would make the hero's beloved die right before his eyes. The master wounded our hero without a knife. He could not do anything with the teacher's arguments. But still, if Alan enters the top 20, then Uther promised to treat his favorite characters well. And besides, he can show a small sketch and also give him a couple of collector's editions with illustrations. Alan found it hard to resist and had to say that he would try to win. The conversation ended, and Alan returned to his previous place where Steve was waiting for him. Alan's face showed tension. He put his hand on Steve's shoulder and said that the master was looking for him. Seeing that gloomy expression, Steve became afraid. After some time, the guy arrived to the master, who said that Alan was too young to act as a mentor. Uther told the guy to go to the peak of Mount Jin and find their eternal missing person, Miss Hannah. She got caught up in self-improvement again and missed all the latest news. The guy understood the order and immediately went up the mountain flying on his sword. Arriving at the place, Steve stood in front of the closed gate and began to loudly call the girl. But no one answered the guy. He thought that no one was there. Apparently his sister was really busy. Suddenly the door burst open with a strong flow of blue chakra. The cutting wind literally demolished everything in its path, but Steve could hardly stand on his feet. He immediately ran inside to check what had happened, and what he saw surprised him. There was a sign in the sky, shrouded in a blue aura, and the guy wondered what it was. Suddenly, he felt a very strong aura land behind him, and a trembling ran through the guy's body. Hannah, shrouded in a scarlet aura, looked at the guy with a murderous gaze and asked what he was looking at. The guy, shackled with fear, slowly turned around and replied that he was not looking at anything. He had come to convey the news of a great meeting. The girl was being invited to take part in a competition within the clan. Hannah immediately changed her face to that same sweet girl, because she recognized the guy. It was a friend of Alan's brother named Steve. She put her hand on the guy's shoulder and asked, "You didn't see anything like that just now, right?" Frightened by the creepy girl, Steve replied that he saw absolutely nothing. Hannah replied that she understood, and the guy could go. Steve didn't wait long, but immediately tried to get away from this creepy lady as quickly as possible. Hannah felt a little sad because she was so focused on training that she forgot about everything. Brother Alan is truly amazing. In recent days, the girl felt that she had become much stronger. Hannah remembered those puppets that she had fought with earlier and that were difficult for her to defeat. If she fought them now, she would cut them into small pieces. "We need to spend more time practicing. Wait, Brother Alan. I will definitely catch up with you soon." Meanwhile, Alan cursed his master for daring to threaten him. In a normal battle, I would quickly reveal my true strength. But this time the rules are more flexible, so I can throw everything into props so that if I win, I won't be given new responsibilities. The hero collected all his accessories in a bag. With these things, he will definitely win a couple of rounds. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the red, rare jade. The hero considered it an excellent option. The guy wanted to take the stone, when suddenly a voice was heard from the jade, asking the guy to touch it, and then the stone would give him whatever he wanted. Pour your spiritual power into me, and I will give you luck that will reach the heavens. I will give you everything you can think of. But Alan stood motionless. Then the stone began to scream even more and order the hero to touch him and pour in spiritual energy. Touch yourself! Get the hell out! Otherwise I'll break you! Alan shouted and threw a stone to the ground. Suddenly, the jade came back and asked why he was unable to seduce the guy. This was the first time in so many centuries that he had met something like this. Alan replied that this is because Jade's demands are like a pop-up spam window. Looking at the interesting creature, the hero began to think. He became interested in who this stone was. The Scarlet Stone said that he was a venerable lord, a demon of heaven, a great master. What kind of great master is this? I've never heard of such a thing. Scoundrel, I came here with the devil himself. He left and I remained. All the monks of the world should address me as lord. Alan replied that now everything was clear to him. Apparently his master had thrown the stone. This phrase outraged the demon. How dare you insult me? Pour some spiritual energy into me and I will show what I am worth. So it means you have some kind of secret, Alan said with interest, looking at the stone. Well, boy, do you dare to touch me? Or are you still a coward? Alan laughed and touched the jade with his finger. The hero said that this was nothing for him and released his spiritual energy into the ominous stone. In the blink of an eye, he found himself in a heavenly jade void. Around the guy there was only space and purple lights that seemed like raindrops falling down. Wandering through the emptiness, Alan suddenly felt something. He turned around and saw huge violet eyes that mocked the fact that all people are fools. Alan answered the demon that he thought so, that he looked pathetic. He didn't even have his own body. Insolent, how dare human trash like you talk to me like that? To the great demon Mozun. You have a strange name, Alan answered. The demon explained that Mo is a race and Zun is a position. Mr. Mozun is an honorary title. Alan yawned. It seemed too difficult for him. Since your body is purple and you are a demon, just call yourself a purple demon. The great demon got angry and ordered Alan not to call him that. Okay, purple demon, the hero smiled back. Mozun told the guy that he wouldn't behave so arrogantly for long. Does he really think that once he got here, he can do whatever he wants? Alan asked how to leave here then. The demon replied that the first option was to get his permission, but this was not the case with the hero. The second is to bargain with the great demon, wealth, beauty, land, position. What do you need? This proposal interested Alan. The hero's eyes sparkled, and he asked the demon to give him 100 years of life. The demon replied that unfortunately he couldn't do that. Alan was disappointed and called Mozui trash. Do you have any other desires? The demon asked. Alan thought again. In principle, you can get a couple of volumes of my favorite novel so that I can read everything first. The demon asked what kind of novel it was, and Alan began to look for it in his robe. He took out a book with a pink cover and said that it was very popular and was written by his master. And who then should fulfill your desire? The demon shouted. The hero got angry and replied that Mozui was worthless and could not cope with two trifling desires. You, since you refuse to call me by my name and do not want to bargain, you will remain here forever. You will die in fear and hunger. Your body will be completely destroyed, and also... Before the demon could finish speaking, a huge blue hand squeezed his face. Alan clutched the entity tighter. He assumed that if he could touch the demon, he could get out of here. Decided to crush me? Until you master the law of the Great Tao, you will not be able to cause me any harm. The demon laughed. But suddenly he felt his body begin to crack from the powerful grip. The demon couldn't believe what was happening, and Alan told him that it was an interesting coincidence. It just so happened that the guy was not so simple. After some time, Alan returned to his former place after breaking out of prison. He held the scarlet jade in his hand, thinking that he had done well in harvesting. A little earlier, a wounded and crying little demon offered the guy a magical weapon, and he agreed. The hero put the stone in his robe and thought that with the purple demon weapon, he could now relax. Well, there are still 2 days before the competition. You need to have a good rest. Meanwhile, somewhere far away in the thicket of the forest, 2 voices were heard in one of the caves. The guy in the robes of the Sword Clan looked into the purple mirror, in which an unknown person asked what his chances of winning were. The monk replied that with the secret treasure that his owner gave him, he would be among the top 5. Great, the dark figure replied. Thanks to you, I can return the bloody sphere. I owe you my life, the guy shouted. You saved me. For your sake, I will go through both fire and water. The figure replied that the guy had a good heart. When he received permission to participate in the great meeting, he would take him away from the swordsman clan. The man raised his head, and we saw his green eyes. He told the gentleman that he would not let him down, and would complete the mission at all costs. The unknown person in the mirror laughed evilly, and then the connection was cut off. 2 days later, monks were gathering at the main peak of the swordsman clan. Reynolds began his ceremonial speech. "We have gathered the disciples that the Sword Clan has accepted into its ranks over the past few years. This competition is not only a test of your ascension in recent years, but also the election of the clan's most worthy disciple. Unlike in previous years, talismans, elixirs, spiritual formations, and other things can be used during a duel. You will only need to defeat your opponent and get the highest score to move on. But no matter what, you cannot injure your opponents for no reason. I, together with other clan masters, will watch your fights to prevent injuries to students. Let the competition begin." Reynolds ended his speech with such solemn words and used his strength. Hundreds of small stars appeared in a whirlwind in the air. These stars formed into tablets with inscriptions. Then all these signs rushed into the hands of each applicant. Reynolds explained that this jade tablet in the hands of the students would show the number of their opponents. If the jade tablet lights up in your hands, then it is time to enter the arena and take part in the duel. The first round pitted John Ting from the Langston Hall against Bai John from the Blue Moon Hall. Frank asked Master Kevin what he thought about the newcomers. The man replied that out of all of them, there were one or two outstanding people. Uther intervened in the conversation, saying that with the spiritual energy that these students have, one fight will take no more time than it takes for a cup of tea. The battle began in the arena. The masters watching the battle understood what Master Uther meant. This meant that they would know the results of the competition by the end of the day. And so it happened. Towards evening, there were almost no contenders left, and the head of the clan announced the start of the next battle. In the final round, the inner disciples will be battling it out between Steve and Carl from a blue moon. Alan, who arrived late in the evening, was surprised that almost all the fighting was over. He was also happy to see his younger brother Steve, because the guy was able to reach the finals. The battle began. Carl attacked Steve with a powerful blow of his sword, but the guy managed to block the attack. The opponent was not easy. This Carl from the Blue Moon Hall was at the 5th level of the Immortal Palace limit. But Alan's younger brother did not give up and continued to fight. Although his opponent is a stage higher than him, Steve's sword technique is excellent. He can compare with a true disciple and apparently has already mastered the subtlety of the sword. Alan only taught him a couple of tricks, but he was able to master everything and improve his skills. He definitely has talent. If he tries hard, he will most likely be taken as an apprentice by Master Mark. Steve directed his blue aura at the enemy, but he was able to deftly deflect it. Carl suggested that Steve stop their attempts to exhaust each other and find out who will win this fight here and now. A little tired, Steve agreed with his opponent. He also wanted to offer this. Carl took out a piece of paper and blue energy suddenly began to appear from it. The audience recognized this talisman. It allows you to burn your own spiritual energy and spiritual knowledge for a short period of time in order to experience your own strength at full power. Elder brother Carl wanted to use the 4th level talisman, so he doesn't skimp on money. Steve also did not stand aside and swallowed a small pill. It was an explosive energy pill. Although this pill is only a 3rd level, considering its effect, it is completely equal to the talisman that Carl uses. Carl used the Moon Spirit Sword, Moonbending, and warned Steve to prepare for his attack. The guy also used one of his most powerful attacks, the Wind Spirit Sword, Silver Dragon. An explosion occurred. Both powerful forces clashed in a duel. Everything must be decided with one blow. The smoke from the impact began to clear. One of the contenders was on his knee, which means that we have a winner. When the smoke cleared, the audience saw Steve. The guy realized that he had lost. Carl told the guy that he was better only in spiritual energy and not much. If the younger brother had been at the same stage of ascension as him, then Carl would undoubtedly have lost. Hearing the words of support, Steve was delighted. He mentally thanked Alan for the lessons, because if it weren't for him, the guy would never have reached that level of skill in wielding a sword. The referee declared the match over, and Carl from the Blue Moon Hall was declared the winner. Reynolds also appreciated the two disciples. One has a good spirit, and the other has great talent. Both have the ability to become true disciples. The head of the clan asked Selena if he could disturb her, and the girl replied that it was her responsibility to use her ability. A pink aura enveloped the guys, and they felt a surge of strength, their wounds healed, and their spiritual energy was restored. The judge announced that Carl had reached the 1st place among all the inner disciples. According to the rules, you have the opportunity to choose a true disciple who you want to fight. If you can win, you will replace his place among the true disciples. Carl thought for a moment and named the student he chooses. It will be Alan from Leo Yun Hall. The audience whispered, "Elder brother Alan is a true disciple, but the weakest of them all. his ascension is only at the 6th level of the Immortal Palace limit, so he can safely be called the weakest true disciple in the history of the Sword Clan. Alan landed on the arena, Carl asked his brother for help, and the guy agreed. Suddenly, Steve turned to Carl and asked him to be careful. The man didn't understand what his younger brother meant, but for some reason his words gave him a bad feeling. The judge announced the start of the duel between the two monks. Carl turned to Alan and said that he first heard about him a long time ago. Alan, hearing these words, thought it was praise and replied that he was very flattered. But Carl did not want to praise him. To be honest, he was terribly disappointed in the behavior of a true student. He, along with other inner disciples, gave all their strength to ascend to become a true disciple. They exhausted themselves every day with training and did not even think about rest for a minute. Listening to the monk's story, Alan already guessed what he wanted to tell him. Carl started shouting that unlike them, Alan was a true student who worked a 9-to-5 schedule and never took climbing seriously. Even outside of training, you spent a lot of time just fooling around, sleeping, and not even thinking about the path of the sword. Your lazy actions have no place in the Sword Clan. I will destroy you and take your place among the true disciples. Alan summoned dozens of scarlet symbols and replied that he didn't think his 9-to-5 schedule would be the source of anyone's hatred. Carl released his spiritual energy. A blue aura surrounded him, and the monk rushed into battle. Alan grinned when he saw his brother's attack and suddenly summoned a scarlet dome for everyone to see. The blue sword energy hit Alan's barrier. But to Carl's surprise, the barrier did not allow his spiritual energy to pass through, and there was not a scratch on it. The spectators could not believe their eyes. Alan was completely fine and did not receive a single drop of damage. Kevin was indignant. For Alan, it all seems like some kind of joke. The students of the Sword Clan follow the path of the blade and never retreat. The path of the blade is inevitably sprinkled with blood. Look at this guy. He is hiding behind a mascot. Is this how a rising disciple should behave? He is a disgrace to the Sword Clan. Does Master Kevin really think that a Sword Clan disciple can only follow the path of bloodshed and should not have the slightest sense of self-preservation? If everyone were as impulsive as you, Uther said, then the clan would not exist long ago. Kevin was outraged when he heard such a remark. He asked Uther what he meant by this. Enough. This intra-clan competition was created for the upcoming great meeting where there are no rules. Alan has his own reasons for behaving this way, Reynolds shouted. As long as he goes to victory, there is no problem. On the battlefield, Alan also stood under the protection of the dome and the inner disciple. Carl was furious that Alan, although a true student still, when fighting with him, the inner student, he hides behind a talisman. And how are you different from a turtle? The Carl shouted and rushed to attack the enemy. The guy's sword seemed to begin to break through the barrier, but suddenly Alan grabbed it with 2 fingers, stopping it with ease. Carl froze in place. He could not understand what had happened. Alan, holding the sword, said that if the monk was so eager to fight him, then he would give him a chance. The spectators were a little happy that they would finally start fighting. Otherwise, they were already starting to fall asleep. Steve, meanwhile, mentally said goodbye to his brother Carl. He was glad to meet him. Carl chuckled. Finally, the older brother began to show his strength. With his hands folded in a sign of reconciliation, Carl apologized for what he said earlier. He hoped that it did not offend the true disciple too much. Alan replied that he understood that this was said in the heat of the moment, and of course it would not hurt him. Carl ran his fingers over his blade, and dozens of blades created by spiritual energy appeared in the air. The guy asked his older brother to attack. Alan smiled, and a new talisman appeared in his hand, pouring spiritual energy into him. This talisman began to sparkle. The audience was surprised. They wondered what kind of talisman this was. They had never seen anything like it before. Scarlet sparks summoned hundreds of fireballs, which were under Alan's control. It was incredible that just one talisman could release so much spiritual energy. Carl did not wait long and attacked the fireballs with his blades. But suddenly, his blue spiritual energy dissipated, and the balls still remained on the battlefield. Carl couldn't believe his eyes. There were still more than half of the balls left. It was simply impossible. Alan pointed at his opponent, and instantly fireballs rushed towards him. In response to this attack, Carl shouted that now he would show all his power. He folded his fingers into the appropriate sign, his hand became covered with a scarlet aura, and at the same second, blood poured out of the guy's mouth and onto his blade. This was one of the secret techniques. His spiritual energy turned red, and the guy prepared to take the attack. 2 powerful forces collided with each other. But despite the powerful energy summoned, Carl was unable to hold back the onslaught of fire. A loud explosion was heard on the battlefield, and a naked man flew out of the epicenter. Carl was lying on the ground. Not a trace of his clothes remained. His body was burned, and the hair on his head was puffed up like popcorn. The girls watching the fight squealed in embarrassment and closed their eyes so as not to look at the naked monk. I told you that this would happen, but you didn't listen, Steve said after the fleeing Carl. One of the students who took third place was horrified because he also originally wanted to choose Brother Alan as his opponent. The smoke from the fire cleared, and the judge announced that they had a winner, the true disciple Alan. The hero smiled and said that apparently he had overdone it, and hoped that he had not caused psychological trauma to anyone present. Alan was able to win and not use his power. Everything went exactly according to plan. Next should be Steve, who must also choose his opponent. Steve ran closer to the arena and shouted to his older brother that this fight was simply amazing. Alan put his hand on the enthusiastic guy's shoulder and told him to keep working. Encouraged, Steve accepted his mentor's instructions and entered the arena, preparing his sword. He chose his opponent. It was elder brother Lin. Lin was surprised that he was chosen because he was ranked third among all the true disciples. The guy entered the arena and the fighters greeted each other. Suddenly, Alan was called by his teacher and asked to come for a second. The hero did not torment the elders with waiting and immediately headed to the terrace. Landing near the elders, he kindly greeted all the masters, but in response he heard only silence. It was clear that they were not very friendly. Uther got straight to the point and asked his student where he got that talisman from. Previously, I inherited this family treasure from my ancestors in the secret realm, and thus learned about this hundreds of hell dragons talisman. The power that this talisman can release is directly related to the spiritual energy of the student. In reality, he obtained it by making a deal with that purple demon and giving him some of his spiritual energy in return. When this talisman is activated, its power will be comparable to attacking someone at the 4th level of the Purple Palace. I just need to use these spiritual talismans during the fight, and I will be able to win 2 fights without lifting a finger and be in the top 20. So Alan will not only question his strength, but also fulfill the task of the teacher, to whom he demonstrated his family treasure. Suddenly, the guy was called by the name of Kevin, who was clearly unhappy with him. The hero turned to the master and asked what he wanted to tell him. As a Sword Clan disciple, you know how to wield a sword well, but you chose talismans instead. Isn't this the easiest way to win without fighting? What does winning without fighting mean? Alan asked. Since competition between clans does not prohibit the use of talismans, then my tactics do not go beyond the rules. Or maybe Master Kevin does not agree with the rules that the head of the clan established. Kevin replied that he was just wondering how far Alan could go with his scam, at which point their conversation was interrupted by the head of the clan. Alan, since you received the talisman from the Secret Kingdom, we will no longer torment you with questions, Reynolds said. You can go. We wish you good luck in the upcoming competitions. The hero bowed his head and thanked the head for the parting words and said that he would leave here immediately. In his thoughts, the guy was glad that the head helped him out. Next time, he will give him more bags of tea. A few minutes later, the competition in which Steve participated ended, and unfortunately, the guy lost. Although the student lost, Alan knew that he had good skills and was not far away from being initiated into a true student. The competition between the inner disciples has come to an end, the judge announced, and now the fights among the true disciples will begin. Students from Grid A were announced, and Alan had Grid B. The guy guessed that his turn wouldn't come even after an hour and a half. Therefore, he decided to rest a little while levitating in the air. After a few fights, the judge announced a new fight. It was a match between Hannah from the Hall of the Hidden Mirror and a girl from the Hall of the Blue Moon. The guys who were in the audience were happy that finally there would be a fight between the strongest student Hannah, who was also liked by many, not only for her hard work. Alan heard the guys chanting the student's name. Apparently Hannah is really very popular. But many people also shouted the name of her rival. There are rumors that the younger sister Alice is very beautiful, and many people discuss her. Apparently all these guys are so excited because they want to see 2 beauties fight. The first girl, enveloped in purple petals, appeared on the battlefield. This was Alice from the Blue Moon Hall. She was the 4th level of the Purple Palace, and the girl was ranked 6th on the Divine Leaderboard. Next came Sister Hannah, the 5th level of the Purple Palace, and the 1st place on the Divine Honor Board. Hannah's gaze was stern. Alan immediately noticed that the purpose of the elder sister's sword was stronger, and her ascension had increased. The masters also noticed this, but Alice is not weak either. Her blue moon sword technique includes magic and power techniques, mysterious and terrifying. Selena asked the head what he thought the outcome of the fight would be. Reynolds replied that both contenders are the strongest among their peers, but in Hannah's ascension to a level higher than Alice, I think that everything will become known before the incense burns out. The judge announced the start of the fight. Alice said that a year had passed since her and Hannah's last fight. Last time they exchanged 133 blows, and Alice only missed 1. Since then, she has been practicing climbing hard. Her strength is not what it was before. Alice hoped that today, Hannah would know how much higher her sword technique had become, after which she summoned the shadow step technique. Meanwhile, Hannah held her sword tightly, concentrating her strength. Only for a split second did the girl take her sword out of its sheath, which illuminated the battle area with its bright light. Then the girl turned around and, to the surprise of the audience, began to leave the arena. Behind the student, hundreds of blows from the blue blade of cutting phantoms appeared in a split second. Alice's blade fell to the ground, her illusion dissipated, and the girl was forced to admit defeat. She looked at her trembling hands and could not believe that she had lost so quickly. Hannah turned around and told the girl that she only won because Alice let her. The audience did not understand what had happened at all, why the elder sister Alice admitted defeat so quickly. One of the observers asked the elder brother Zhao if he saw this attack. The man with red hair replied that one blow immediately destroyed all illusions. The sword skills of the younger sister Hannah improved again. In addition, junior sister Hannah came into contact with junior sister Alice's sword 10 times in such a short time, causing her spiritual energy to go in a different direction and loosening her grip. Bill, who was ranked third on the heavenly leaderboard, said that this was mostly due to the sword falling from Sister Alice's hands and her admitting defeat. The top disciple of the Zhao clan, second place on the heavenly table, said that to be precise, they collided about 20 or 30 times. He was unable to count the exact number. Alan knew that, not counting the blow that dispelled the illusion, there were 23 more blows, which dispelled the spiritual energy contained in Alice's sword. No wonder she is the best among the true disciples. I just gave her a few tips, and she was able to develop them into such a beautiful fighting technique. Amazing. Just look at the faces of the masters and elders. They are absolutely delighted with what they see. Frank jumped up from his chair and said that it was a beginner sword technique. There could be no mistake. It was definitely her. How old is Hannah? I think she has been climbing since she was 20 years old. With such talent, the girl will become an invincible swordsman in the future. The so-called beginning path refers to the sword technique, one of the 3,000 different paths. There are only 10,000 cultivators of the 9th level of the Purple Palace in the whole world. But among all those who can understand the path, analyze it, and ascend to the truth, there are terribly few. Countless cultivators have tried to go overboard, going to dangerous places just to have even a small understanding of the path, even if you search the entire world, it will be difficult to find an equally talented disciple. With such a talented student, the clan will become stronger and stronger, Reynolds replied. By the end of this competition, I will personally find Hannah and ask her in detail about the training. The fighting between the students continued, and towards evening, Alan became bored. The sun had already begun to set, which meant that his working time was almost over. The judge invited the following fighters into the arena: student number 23, Sean from Liuyun Hall, and Alan from Liuyun Hall. Looking at the booklet for the upcoming battle, one of the students was horrified, remembering that same guy. Sean was the first to arrive at the arena. He was a massive, dark-skinned man who clearly wanted to get started. Sean from Liuyun Hall ranked 13th on the heavenly table and had the 2nd level of the Purple Palace. I would never have thought that in the very first fight, I would meet an older brother from my own hall, also in 13th place among the students. But nothing can be done. Alan arrived at the arena. The judge announced the start of the fight, and a barrier formed around Alan. Sean, seeing the barrier, assumed that the talisman had already been restored. Alan replied that one could say so. Sean said that as soon as he entered Liuyun Hall, he perked up and wanted to become number 1 in the Sword Clan. I had strict expectations for my brothers, believing that everyone in Liuyun Hall was working hard to ascend and did not allow themselves to rest. But you are a true disciple of Liuyun Hall, and not only do you not work at all, but also your laziness infects the entire hall. What kind of high expectations for children's speech is he making? Alan thought. Why does it seem like he's even more serious than our teacher? Big brother Sean, the hero replied. I respect your opinion, but you can't force it on me. Working from 9 to 5 is what I live for, and it is different from laziness. You must understand that in life, besides climbing and work, there are many important and interesting things. Alan remembered that he had to pay a high price to learn this from personal experience. He hoped that Sean would also be able to understand this someday. Even now you are looking for excuses, Sean shouted. You don't even use a sword in battle, but shift all the work to trinkets. Today, I will break your talisman and make you understand that the Sword Clan lives by the sword and follows its path. The path of swordsmanship is the ultimate goal for every student, including me. After these words, the audience heard a loud impact of ice shards on Alan's barrier. The spectators were amazed to see such a strong blow. Its strength was comparable to the 5th level of the Purple Palace. It looks like Alan will soon be carried on a stretcher. He is still just at the limit of the Palace of the Immortals. He is lucky that he lasted so long. The judge was ready to announce the end of the fight because Alan was encased in ice. But suddenly the ice cracked, and the guy's insidious smile appeared from under it. As expected from senior brother Sean, the power of your strike exceeded all my expectations. Steve and the other spectators were surprised to see Alan escape the trap. Sean was also surprised because he put all his strength into this blow, but it only hit the talisman and did not hurt it at all. Your protective talisman turned out to be stronger than I expected, Shan replied. But now it is broken. Will you face me or admit defeat? Alan replied that he wanted to admit defeat, and at that moment, various talismans appeared from his sleeve. But unfortunately, he simply cannot lose in this battle, and therefore he uses all these talismans. Sean grinned. Since he was able to break one of Alan's talisman, he could break others. The hero said that destroying these talismans would not be as easy as the student thought. After all, the talisman that he broke was a weakened version, so the hero advised Sean to give up. After all, this is a full version of the barrier. At that very second, a huge blue barrier formed around the guy. Seeing such terrifying power, Sean froze in place. Looking at his older brother with a stern look, Alan asked him to attack. Is this some kind of joke? The audience thought in bewilderment, where did this guy get so many talismans? Sean bared his teeth with overwhelming anger. The man jumped and summoned ice fragments. Pieces of ice crashed into the barrier, but this time they couldn't do anything. Thousands of talismans reliably protected Alan from any attack. The spectators began to whisper. Sean had just spent all his strength. Breaking the shield of so many talismans would not be easy. How powerful would the attack need to be to break through it? Frank, watching the fight, was surprised that the guy used all these talismans so suddenly. Can he really control them using only his spiritual power when he is at the Immortal Palace limit stage? He must have used some kind of medicine or treasure to increase the amount of his spiritual energy, Kevin guessed. Meanwhile, Reynold was amazed that he would never have thought that Alan would be able to find a way to shirk work right in the middle of an interclan competition. Uther analyzed the fight. From the very beginning, Alan used a standard shield talisman and deliberately did not show the full rune, which forced Sean to use all her power to attack. And then he revealed a full set of runes, when the enemy had already spent a lot of spiritual energy, and there was no need to worry if he broke through the shield again. Could it be that Alan thought of all this in advance? This is the first time my student has fought at this level, only because of our agreement. As a teacher, I am pleased with his result. But still, both of these guys were students of Uther. Therefore, the master would not like to see either one student or another lose. Sean continued to attack the barrier, but each time it recovered. After another attack, he fell to his knee, exhausted. Out of overwhelming anger, he slammed his fist into the ground. Even though he used all his spiritual energy, he still cannot destroy this shield. Therefore, the man decided to admit defeat. It was pointless to continue the fight. The judge announced. The hero smiled and bowed to his elder brother, saying that he only won because he allowed him to win. Sean did not answer, but simply turned around and began to leave the arena. Turning around, he said that a Purple Palace level 3 cultivator could break Alan's shield just with a little concentration. The same method will not work with other students. The guy will not always be able to pull off this trick. But Shan lost. But Alan would not get far if he relied only on the shield. The man hoped that the guy had more tricks in store to raise Liu Yunhao higher in rank. The hero was surprised by these words and thanked his older brother for his comments. Although senior brother Sean's words were rude, his intentions are good. But I don't care about rank. I just want to live an ordinary life in this world. Alan turned around and began to walk down from the arena. Around him, he heard the spectators condemning him, saying that this fight was too shameful. Everyone said that he did not even draw his blade. He was not worthy to be considered a true student. In principle, the hero expected such a reaction. He moved away from the arena and returned to his favorite activity, relaxing by the tree. Hannah, watching the fight, could not understand how older brother Alan came to use talismans. Suddenly, someone called the girl's name and she turned around. It was a true student of the Hidden Mirror Hall named Jennifer, who asked Hannah if she also thought that this fight was a bit shameful. Hannah got angry hearing this and asked how her little sister could even say such a thing. The head has long announced the rules for this competition. No restrictions, victory is most important. So tell me what's wrong with brother Alan winning this fight because of his talent. The poor girl did not know what to answer. She just wanted to find a topic for conversation. Somehow Sister Hannah reacts too sharply to her words. Jennifer replied that Alan was a student of the Sword Clan and at the same time did not use a single blade technique. This was too much. Who said that a disciple of the Sword Clan must follow the path of the sword? According to my knowledge, the second elder ascended to the truth through the path of the wind. There's a reason Brother Alan doesn't use his sword. The thing is, he doesn't need a sword to defeat his opponents, Hannah said enthusiastically. The girl stood and flew admiringly in the clouds. Jennifer did not understand what was happening to Hannah. This was strange because, as the first student of the clan, she always worked hard and did not even look towards lazy students. But as soon as Alan, the laziest student of the clan, appeared, she suddenly became his protector. Today, something is definitely wrong with her. Suddenly, the girl's conversation was interrupted by the cry of the judge, who shouted at the monk asking how he could be so cruel. Alan also heard a scream and also felt a strange energy. One of the students was lying on the platform. He was dead and a sword was stuck in his body. A monk, shrouded in purple lightning, hovered above the man's body. It was a true disciple of Liu Yun Hall named Urui. He was ranked 33rd on the heavenly leaderboard. Alan became wary when he saw the death of one of the monks. Although the intra-clan competition this time takes place without any restrictions, it has several strict rules. One of them is the ban on intentional injury. "Urui, what have you done?" the judge shouted and concentrated his spiritual power. The energy slightly attacked the guy, and he replied that he needed to ask the elders what he had done. After all, after using his technique, it cannot be cancelled, which is why he lost control and killed the student. If it weren't for the rules, he would not have used this technique. Mark was surprised that one blow from this guy could release the power of the 5th level of the Purple Palace. It was strange that he had never heard of the existence of such a disciple in Master Uther's hall. Uther told about this guy. This child's name is Urui. A year ago, he left the hall in search of a secret kingdom. It was only 2 weeks ago that he passed through it and returned to the clan. I didn't think that his ascension level from the 2nd level of the Purple Palace would go to the 5th. Could it be that he received some kind of powerful treasure in the secret kingdom? Reynold found out what kind of technique the guy was using. He was using a secret technique from ancient times called explosive spirit mastery. It consists of compressing all the spiritual energy of the body into one point and then releasing it. This technique is very powerful, but it is also very difficult to control because it uses all the force in the human body. Entering the arena, the head of the clan stated that apparently this disciple killed the monk unintentionally. He ordered the rest of the disciples to prepare everything necessary for burying the body and also to clean the arena. This monk was not strong enough, entered the battle, and was mercilessly killed by Uru. The path of the sword is inextricably linked with death. I ask all disciples to be careful. If your strength is not enough to fight, it would be better to admit defeat and stay alive. The girls also arrived at the arena, and Jessica remembered that in the previous competition, there were also those who forced themselves to participate, even though the spiritual energy was weak or fought to the death without thinking about the value of their lives. Hannah confirmed her words, but last time the head and elders could have prevented the fatal outcome of the fight. The best student had no idea that this time everything would be different or that anything would happen at all. Urui looked with a mad look at the spectators who followed him with their gaze. He left the arena and pulled his bloody sword behind him. A villainous smile appeared on the student's face. It seemed as if a dark aura surrounded him. Alan thought it was his imagination, but it seems he felt the demon energy emanating from this guy. The incident put enormous pressure on the remaining true disciples in the following fights. Although everyone used their best techniques, they still held back. Reynold announced that half of the 55 true students were eliminated. 28 people made it to the second round. Now the remaining ones will receive plaques for the next round of the competition. He created the blue plaques again, and instantly they were in the hands of the students. Alan knew that if he won this round, he would be in the top 20. Once this happens, my agreement with the teacher will be fulfilled. I will just need to naturally lose in the 3rd round of the competition and leave. The second round of the competition began. The first battle was to involve Urui from the Liu Yun Hall against Xiao from the Nebula Hall. Spectators wondered how this battle would end. Someone bet on Xiao because he is in first place in the Nebula Hall. But some thought that Urui would win because, according to rumors, he now has the 5th level of the Purple Palace. Xiao, who had the 5th level of the Purple Palace and was ranked 5th on the Divine Leaderboard, said that he did not know about Urui until today. To be more precise, he does not take anyone seriously except the top 10 disciples of the clan. Therefore, Xiao allowed the guy to attack first since he was a beginner. All the girls in the audience squealed with delight. They wished their older brother good luck. This guy didn't repeat a single pose before entering the arena, Alan thought. Confidence is certainly good, but if you can't handle it, you'll get hit right in the face. The battle began. Urui laughed when he heard Xiao's words and advised his elder brother to be careful. Purple devilish energy rushed towards Xiao. The attack was quite fast. The top student summoned a pink dome and Uruya's attacks crashed into it. The purple blade made a hole in the dome, but Xiao blocked it with his sword. Suddenly, blood flowed from Xiao's mouth. The spectators were scared. His brother was injured. It was impossible for Uruya's attack to be so powerful. Xiao fought off multiple sword attacks from his opponent, but he continued to advance. The best student told his opponent that he had underestimated him. Urui, meanwhile, could not believe that the guy was still standing on his feet. Alan grinned. This Xiao is smarter than I thought. He used causticity and self-confidence as a defense, although in reality he was teasing Uruya and provoking him to make the first blow, because he did not say that he would not block his attack. He prepared everything and used the Misty Hall sword technique to release spiritual energy into the sky and create a shield, which just allowed him to block a large number of strikes. Xiao smiled. He told his opponent that this blow was not bad, but he guessed what its essence was. At that very second, the guy released his spiritual energy and summoned the Misty Hall sword technique. This technique was called the Sea of Stars. It instantly fell on the enemy. The spectators watching the spectacle thought that the battle was over. But everything was not so simple. In a split second, Alan saw that Uruya's eyes took on a demonic appearance. At that moment, he realized that the winner was determined because a rain of dark spiritual energy fell into the arena. Xiao could not understand how Urui was able to attack him, even after he used his signature move. Opening his eyes, the swordsman saw a huge sword made of spiritual energy flying at him. He summoned a shield that looked like a pink lotus flower, but Urui knew that it was still useless. To Xiao's surprise, the purple energy penetrated his shield and knocked his sword out of his hands. At this moment, Xiao guessed that this guy had actually hidden his true strength.